We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome.
So you guys bear with us just for a little bit, okay? We'll be right with you.
All right, I'll start with comments from the public regarding items that are not on the agenda. Yes, Susie.
Good evening. My name is Susie Merrick, and I'm a South Burlington community member and a parent in the South Burlington School District. And I'm very honored to be here tonight to celebrate 3 South Burlington School District alumni and share information with the school board, since I know them to be a group that values the good work of our students and our alums. The 3 alums that I am celebrating are Megan Henry, Hunter DeGangi, and Nora King, all students at the University of Vermont. I thank them for making time in their busy lives to attend this meeting, and, quite inspirational to me, inviting their professor, Dr. Kathleen Leong, who coincidentally is the parent of another South Burlington School District alum. I love our South Burlington School District ENDS policy and its rich mix of social and emotional and academic learning. I've often wondered if there would be a way we might measure whether that ENDS policy holds up after graduates have left our school buildings. And I'm here to tell you that the ENDS policy and what our district hopes it will accomplish is alive and well in these 3 wonderful young adults. All 3 were part of a UVM course taught by Dr. L entitled Dollar Enterprise. This award-winning course is an experiential learning activity for students to design, plan, and operate small businesses on campus. All proceeds are donated to charity organizations. 2 programs in which I am involved, PACT and SB Mentoring, were the lucky beneficiaries of Dollar Enterprise. Megan and her team chose PACT last year, and Nora and Hunter and their team chose SB Mentoring this year. And this is where proof of the ENDS policy becomes evident. As business entrepreneurs, Hunter, Nora, and Megan and their colleagues were expected to think creatively, take initiative, be resourceful, and work collaboratively with others. The course teaches and then empowers students to develop their passions and interests, build supportive relationships with others, and, in a nutshell, take social responsible actions to benefit the local community. If the language sounds familiar, it's because I've lifted it directly from the ENDS policy. And here's the most compelling part of why I've been so inspired by these 3. They took the ENDS policy to its next chapter. Communication I received from all 3 of them was always respectful, thoughtful, and clear. In person, all 3 are strong, compassionate human beings, incredibly thoughtful and kind, exactly what we want in our leaders of tomorrow. Their commitment to Dollar Enterprise was remarkable. They modeled the hope that I see young adults easily carry in their pockets, the awareness that with hard work, they can indeed make a difference in the world. They intentionally chose South Burlington programs to be the recipients of their hard work. And speaking to them, I came to learn that they felt strongly about giving back to the community from which they had come. Gratitude in action. I imagine all 3 would give credit to their wonderful families and to Dr. L for teaching them. I would like to publicly thank them for teaching me.
Nice. Thank you very much.
Susie.
What a round of applause. Can I invite any of the students if you'd like to make a comment? Or I'd certainly like to thank you on behalf of the board as well. No pressure at all, though.
Thanks, Dr. L. I didn't prepare anything. But my name is Hunter. I'm a junior at UVM, born and raised in South Burlington. And when we had the opportunity, and Dr. L said you can donate to any local charity, Nora's on my team as well, and Megan is our teacher's assistant, and we just automatically thought South Burlington. There wasn't a doubt in our minds that we wanted to give back to the wonderful community that made us who we are today. So, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well said. And thank you, Susie, for those lovely comments. Very nice. Great to hear from alum as well. Good. Any other comments from the public regarding items that are not on the agenda? All right, seeing none. David, do we have amendments to the agenda?
Yes, we do. And I would like to move or add a real-world design, our national award winners up, and I would like to do that right after this.
Okay.
We do have an addition to the superintendent's report, which is to update the board on the high school and middle school elevator project, to include also the a bond update.
Okay.
I do believe you have an amendment following 8 around a board share about a grievance.
Yes. We'll add that after.
Number 8.
After 8.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And we will not have, under item 12, executive limitation policy, we will not have 2.5 financial planning. That will be moved to the December 3rd meeting.
Okay.
And that is all I have for amendments. Actually, not all. Those are all of the ads.
All of the
changes.
amendments,
Right.
okay. All right, so should we hold on announcements and the student representative?
Yeah, I think it would be
Okay.
good, since we have our folks here behind us, which
Okay.
we're so happy to do. So I'd like to start that off, if we could.
Great, let's do that.
So I'm going to be really, really short, but I was honored to, of course, I don't follow all of Mr. Burke's tweets, although I know most people do. And you know he's a big supporter, as many people are. And but I was really, really excited. I actually got the email from Mr. Barner, and it was the holy cow email. And I obviously was proud and supported and sent that on to the board. And again, it took on its own life a little bit. But we are really, really excited to have you here. We're really excited and want to congratulate you on all of your hard work. Before I turn it over to Mr. Burke, you know, I want to, just for the audience, I think we've had a great opportunity to hear from Susie just now around ends. And I think as you hear this presentation, as I've been part of the work that this group has done and the Real World Design Challenge folks have done, embodies what I would say very, very specifically the work that we want to do with our ends: academic, personal disposition, and citizenship, and just embodies what we believe is so appropriate. So without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Burt, our proud principal of the high school. Patrick.
So I'm going to be fantastically brief. I just want to, of course, congratulate the team and really let Steve Barner talk about them. To do anything else would kind of be like going on the field after winning a soccer championship and handing out the medals. Oh wait, I did that. Okay. But seriously, Steve, folks who don't know Steve Barner and the kind of person that he is, and actually people who are here, many of you know this, but I think he is among the most humble and committed professionals that I've ever come across in any field. And Steve he and I have been working together for 17 years, and we used to work really closely together on different kinds of technology projects. And I always felt like if we drove to Rutland together for a meeting, I learned more on the ride down and the ride back than I ever did at the meeting. And I think he's held it in high esteem by both students and faculty and community. So Steve, I just want to introduce you and give you an opportunity to talk about your team.
Yeah.
Steve Barner.
Thank you, Pat. I want to start out by saying that everything I know that's really important about education, I learned from Tim Kamoli and Jay Hoffman, because Jay's followed in Tim's footsteps as I've tried to follow, which is empower the students, create the learning environment, work as hard as you can to provide the resources that the kids need, and then get the heck out of their way. Because if you set it up right and you get and as long as the kids understand the value of the challenge, they will always amaze you with what they'll pull off. And I think that's what you're going to see here today. when they present to you. It has been my greatest personal and mostly my greatest professional experience to work with these exceptional young men. And we've had now 6 groups of kids all rise to the challenge, all do amazing jobs in presenting and winning the state. Our name on that state trophy is the only school on that state trophy. We've taken it 6 years in a row. And this is the first time we've cracked the top 3 at nationals, and these kids went so far they put a dent in the ceiling. So I would like to pass this around to the board members. This is their technical report. I'm going to apologize because I tried to save paper and print it double-sided, and our printer mispaginated it. But you'll get an idea from looking at this at really what we're talking about. It's a level of engineering and business and planning that the students applied to this project. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to the guys and watch the magic.
Oh yeah, we have a member in Florida at Embry-Riddle, so we have to Skype him in.
Yeah. Sorry, are you there?
I'm here.
Okay. All right, we're gonna start.
All right. Good evening. We are the Real World Design team from South Burlington High School, and we go by Next Level.
I'm Cyphilic Bandra, the lead engineer.
I'm Daniel Chang, project scientist.
I'm Clark Dane, project manager.
I'm Derek Agnew, chief research officer.
I'm Alec Gelfenbein, business manager.
I'm Thomas Ubanik, systems test engineer.
And I'm Daniel Yee, the project documenter.
So the Real World Design Challenge is a aviation-based engineering challenge geared for high school students. And the challenge revolves around solving a problem that faces the industry today. And that's what makes the challenge so exceptional, I guess, because we have to innovate the future.
So for the 2013 and 14 challenge, we were tasked to come up with a design for a UAS with the purpose of detecting a pest in Iowa called the European cornwort. And we had also had to write up a supporting engineering report and also develop a business plan and effective detection plan.
Here is the structure of the team that was created, and each member brought a unique talent which contributed to the overall goal of creating a well-balanced report.
All right, so STEM is an acronym for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And we have business in here because a large part of the Real World Design Challenge is based around the business aspect of the project.
So here's a visual portrayal of the timeline of our project. And we started working on this in October of last year. And we ended this month, November of this year. So that means that we've worked on this for over a year now. And we've estimated that we've invested around 400 hours each into this project.
Here are some pictures. You can see the team was very functional. We worked very well together, and it was a pretty collaborative team environment.
So what we learned over the course of the challenge were these. Time management was very important because we had to meet certain deadlines and there was just so much material that we had to cover. We also learned how to work as a team because not everybody got along with each other, but it all worked out in the end. We learned how to do some computer-assisted design modeling in OpenVSP, which was very important for the creation of the UAV. And we also learned about real engineering processes and business applications, which were all very important parts of the challenge.
So we also had to apply various aspects of science and math into the project, obviously, through the calculation of business costs, math CAD, and we also had to utilize creative and critical thinking in order to make an innovation.
So we had to use a lot of different programs over the course of this challenge, and from left to right here, we used JavaFoil, OpenVSP, and MathCAD, just to name a few. The different programs we used was MathCAD, as I said before. It's an advanced calculation software. We used it to help fine-tune our design, such as weight and balance, drag calculations, and stuff like that. PTC lack of instruction and experience, but we managed to overcome these obstacles and we used it to render our final design, which you will see later. Javafoil was an easy-to-use free software that was integral to our airfoil selection and design to minimize drag and maximize lift. And we also used Gmail, Skype, and Drive, which we used to communicate with mentors, store files, and talk to each other face-to-face over when we couldn't meet together physically.
So we faced a couple challenges throughout the project. First, after the state challenge, one of our members, Sai, he graduated from SB, and because of that, he had to work from his college dorm, and we had to constantly Skype with him in order to communicate, and because of his demanding schedule, we couldn't always, he wasn't always available to work with us. And separate from that, we also had conflicting schedules during the summer for the national challenge, so we couldn't meet as often as we wanted to.
So the basic idea of the challenge this year was to detect European corn borer in a cornfield. And so some basic background on European corn borer is that they are invasive species that came over from Europe about 100 years ago. And they pose a big problem to the agricultural industry. They prey on corn and they cause a lot of crop loss for farmers.
So we used a grid search pattern, which gave us a very short mission time, mainly because of our large footprint that we got from the Nikon D800, which was the camera that we used. And we also used a car top launcher to launch our UAV. Basically, there's a launcher on top of a car, and it launches the UAV. And that gave us a shorter takeoff time.
So, I mean, I think we would all agree that our biggest innovation was our detection plan. And our innovation came in what we termed our indicator corn. This was a genetically modified corn that we plant in the field along with the commercial corn crop. And this modified corn, its main modification is that it has RFP in it, which is a protein called red fluorescent protein. And the idea behind this is that when a European corn borer actually bites into the plant, the genes of the plant react with the saliva, an enzyme in the saliva, and the whole plant will actually turn red. And what this allows us to do is easily fly our UAV over the field and detect which parts of the field have this red plant in it, and then we can deduce which parts of the field are infected by European corn borer.
So our indicator corn had 3 modifications. The first was male sterility to prevent cross-pollination between our indicator corn and the commercial crops. There's also an extremely short growing season, which means that it sprouts earlier and is more attractive to the European corn borer, and also dies before the harvest season. And the third one is the incorporation of M-cherry, the red fluorescent protein. And the reason that this was so innovative was because the way the other teams detected their pests were through the plant health, because the damage caused by the corn borer was so minimal. So this idea was just completely different from everything else.
So for the engineering design process, we use a funnel type down select process. So we first brainstormed a lot of crazy ideas off the wall, and we didn't really consider if they'd work or if they're ridiculous, within reason of course, but all ideas were accepted. So as the design plan progressed, we took these multitude of concepts and formed a design matrix to down select from that initial pool of ideas. And for example, here's one of the ideas on screen. It's a multi-rotor concept. It's very cheap and it's very simple to use, but its downfall is that it's slow, it cannot carry much payload, and it has a very limited range. So hence it had a low score of 12 out of 45 in a design matrix. Next is our final concept selection with the top 5 scorers in our design matrix showed amongst one another. You can note that one of them is actually a blimp, which was rather unconventional, but due to restrictions, we weren't able to use it. And then finally, we arrived at our detailed design choice through another step, which is a flying wing design. From there, we continued our analysis through the aforementioned software to optimize, and through 4 iterations, we honed our design to achieve our final design, shown here.
So our theoretical business case in both our presentation and in our report covered the following aspects of our business, although tonight we'll only cover our business model and future growth. So after speaking with field experts, we came to the conclusion that if we were to actually develop the indicator corn, it would take 5 years. And on top of that, we would need a year to bring the product to market. During this 6-year period, the FAA is going to release new regulations. We would have to obtain our FAA permit, so we assume that this would take approximately 3 years. But then for 3 years, our UAV would have the ability to fly just for the detection of plant health. This is just flying over, detecting the shade of green that the corn is. And so even though this isn't our full business, it would still save farmers money and allow us to begin making a profit. Our theoretical business was looking to the future and wanted to become a biotechnology company. So once FAA regulations have eased to the point where farmers can actually fly UAVs on their own and don't need certification, we could sell our UAVs and seeds directly to farmers instead of just servicing a few farms per year. Therefore, our potential profits would increase exponentially.
So throughout the challenge, we utilized the knowledge of multitudes of mentors, and I think we can all agree that without mentors, none of us would have been able to come to our ideas that we had. So some standouts were Dr. John Tooker. He's an entomologist at Penn State, and he was the first person to actually kind of get us thinking on the path of a genetically modified plant. While the idea that he gave us was very unrefined and it was basically just like a comment that he made, it led to our final conclusion. Dr. Can Wang, Director of Plant Transformation at Iowa State, and she was our biggest resource for our actual modification. She basically allowed us to say that everything that we were trying to do has been done before, it's all very possible, and that basically just gave so much credibility to our idea that it just added a whole new aspect to it. And then Jaden Garrettson was another fantastic mentor of ours, and he actually has a family farm and he uses UAVs at his farm to fly over and detect plant health, and he gave us some inside knowledge on that.
So as we talked about, we've all invested approximately 400 hours each into this project alone. And it's been hard balancing this large time investment with school and our other extracurricular activities. However, our reward was immense. We placed first overall at the national competition. We were actually the first Vermont team to ever break the top 3. And each of us has received a $50,000 scholarship to Embry-Riddle. And along with this, the most important aspect, I think, is that we all grew and we networked with both our team. We've all developed stronger friendships, and with other teams, along with other executives and leaders of their respective industries who we've networked with, I guess. Here's some pictures of us competing at our national competition.
So to go further into our networking, we first got the chance to interact with all of the other teams at the national competition. So they're from all over the country, as far away as the Marianas. And what was really special to us was getting to interact with our blue ribbon judges after our presentations. And just to name a few, Jim Williams, who is the head of unmanned aircraft systems at the FAA, Michael Madsen, who's the president of Defense and Space at Honeywell, Dr. Edgar Wagoner, who is the Aeronautics Research Missions Director at NASA, and Dr. John Wortet, who's the Chancellor of Embry-Riddle University.
Our team had the opportunity to tour Washington, D.C., and here are a couple of pictures. And, yeah. Thank you to Stephen Barner, the South Burlington High School, the Real World Design Challenge organization, all the corporate and government sponsors that sponsored this competition, and our mentors who were invaluable to us throughout this process. And if you would like to watch our full presentation, we have a link here, and I believe it is also on the school website. Oh, yep. Yeah.
minutes for any questions that you wanted to ask these gentlemen.
Does Embry sponsor the competition?
Yes.
They're one of the sponsors. They're not the biggest one, but they're one of the top sponsors.
What is it that got you guys thinking that you'd be willing to put this amount of time into it?
Oh, I think when we all came in, we knew it was a big commitment, but we never thought it'd be this big. After doing some more research, we found ourselves really interested in the topic, and we just wanted to continue down the process.
I think the biggest thing for some of us was that like this is really basically uncharted territory. Like there's some breaking into this, but like once we did research into this, we realized like we were really doing our own research. Like you know, tried to find people who use UAVs at their farm, and that took us like 8 months to find one person.
Right. So yeah, just I guess to clarify a bit, I mean precision agriculture using UAVs is a really not touched upon subject as of yet. Yet agriculture is about to boom due to the increase of population, and this is a very interesting topic to cover.
Yeah, the current FAA regulations don't actually allow this to take place yet, but they're actually a little overdue for releasing their.
They're in the middle of doing something right now, I believe, right?
Right, and we actually kind of expected it already, but.
Maybe this will help them get through this.
Well, that's actually one of the things that I think these guys pointed out, that the FAA really needs to move a little faster.
Talk to them about it, tell them.
Right.
So one of the things, you know, that I think is really important is that while you guys were doing this, you also had schoolwork going on. What would you say was the kind of, were you far more eager in some of your content areas that you were studying within school? Did you see there was some connections happening for you, like, wow, you know, this comes to light for me? I think it would be interesting for us to hear a little bit about that. You know, you're out there in the real world design challenge, and likely you're applying some of the things you've learned, I'm thinking.
Yeah, definitely. I think it was mostly, well, at least for me, all of the math that I've done for years, not only myself, but a lot of my classmates always question, when am I actually going to use this? And for the first time, I actually saw where I was going to use it, especially being the business manager. I was dealing with a lot of numbers, so.
And also, going to university here, this being an aeronautical university, a lot of the work that I did on this challenge would actually be suitable for an Aero 1 class. A lot of my professors told me while I was asking them questions, and a lot of my seniors did too. A lot of the work that I was doing could be done in class, and that's what they would teach us further along the line. And the fact that I had to teach myself this when I was doing this project, just further the fact that we're going to use this later in life. If we learn now, we could be ahead of the curve.
I think there was a question back here too.
Those look like some pretty hard-hitting mentors, like from either academia or business. How'd you find them?
Not easily.
So for the state challenge, I was actually the project communicator, and then for the national challenge, our idea kind of took off, and then my role kind of was refining that idea. But for the state challenge, I must have sent out hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of emails. Probably 50% of them didn't get any response whatsoever. 25% got, we're out of the office, or this email no longer exists.
With corn borers.
Yeah.
Right.
We called multiple people. A lot of times they didn't pick up. Sometimes they picked up and they're just like, oh, we don't do that. But eventually we found somebody who was like willing to talk to us, and many times it was like we contacted somebody, they said, contact this person, that person said, contact this person. And then, 7 more times down the line, we found somebody who was what we needed. And so it just took a lot of work to get into contact with these people.
Right, we definitely sent hundreds of emails out over the summer.
And I'll point out that early in the process, I was listening to these guys talk to a mentor. I think it was somebody at Iowa State, who, and they were asking about, well, so how does one go about detecting specifically European corn borer infestations from the air? And you hear him talking. And then when he hung up, they asked him, so what did he say? He said he didn't think it could be done. And I think that's really what impressed the judges the most was, the challenge was detect this. And when they find out, well, you can't really do it, they developed a strategy that actually did it. And they were the only team that could specifically say, yeah, the damage is here, and it's not just anything, it's European corn borers.
That's great.
What happens now with this problem? I mean, who takes it from here and runs with it? Anybody? Or is it?
You mean like the European corn borer?
Yeah.
The actual.
Yeah. I mean, does somebody, or like the sponsors of this, or whoever designed this specific challenge?
Well, this is an educational challenge, you know, and so I don't think anybody's really expecting these kids to spin out and start a company, and I don't think they expect to do that. They're all looking forward to going to college. What we're looking forward to is hopefully their performance inspiring another team of students that pick up the ball and try to win this thing again, because we could do it.
Is the idea unique enough to patent?
Yes.
I think that's a safe assumption.
You need a lot of money. I've been through that route before on something, but it might be worthwhile.
We were told that all of these genetic modifications individually have been done before, but they've never been done together. So that's definitely a possibility.
Yeah, well, the problem is it would take several $1 million, like $50 million, to develop the actual indicator plant itself. And that would require a lot of startup capital.
Right, but I wasn't talking about starting, I'm just talking about applying for the patent. So you'd own the patent, and then you sell that to someone else, and every time they do it, they invest the $50 million, and you make money just off the patent.
Well, if somebody wants to loan us the $15,000 it'll cost to go for the patent, let's do it.
Well, one of the things on, you mentioned your mentors, and obviously some of your parents. I'm sure I hope that you thank them all. It sounds like, you know, your mentors, you've already thanked Mr. Barner, but I'm sure those mentors, do they know that you won? I hope.
We've yet to contact a lot of them.
We're planning on sending out letters to each of them,
Yeah.
so.
Well,
Haven't
that's
done that yet.
And I'm sure you said thanks to all those folks that have been around you, your moms and dads and others as well, I'm sure. But we are, I mean, we're proud of you, that's for sure. And I know the high school, Mr. Burke, is extremely proud. And I have to say that perhaps it continues to help us think about ways in which we can continue to make connections for kids in our system, right? And you guys are exemplifying that for us, that we have given you some skills and your passion, your desire, and you've gone out and you've done unbelievable things. And it's really, really impressive. And so we're so proud of you.
I have a question. So congratulations, I think you guys this is awesome. But Mr. Barner, I wonder if for the audience who might watch the tape of this, you could talk a little bit about how kids get involved in real world design, and for instance, whether you take females or
yeah. This is one of the first teams that we've had that's been all male.
Okay.
We've had almost all of our other teams have had multiple females, and actually what we saw at the national competition is that there were very few teams that were all male teams. Last year, I think the team that won was all female. And the very first year, the team was all female. So, you know, we really encourage that. I think and it's not really a gender thing, but the thing that makes a team like this work, because the task is so big, nobody can do everything. And so each one of these people specialized, and they found out and watched what the other students were doing enough so that they could interact and interface with them productively. But I think you guys would agree, right? Everybody had to specialize.
Yeah.
Or it wasn't going to work. And so we invite people of all different interests, whether or not they don't care anything at all about engineering, to get involved.
How many years has this been going on for?
6 years. 6
years, and is this first year for everybody involved, or
no.
second?
Me, Daniel, Chin, and Sai, we did it last year, but for everyone else, this is their first year.
I just would offer that there's an expression that championship teams always stay together, and so I think it's a great moment for you guys as a group, and to have the community celebrate this, and I just want to kind of fast forward for you guys into your future and remind you to, you know, stay in touch with each other And, you know, when next year's real world design team doesn't win the national championship, you can,
I don't understand.
you can feel good about that or not, you know what I mean? But right now, or like, for example, when you bump into one of your teammates from last year, you could kind of say like, oh yeah, you know, I know you were involved, but we won. And, or I think it's nice that you won Vermont. We won, you know, the United States of America. But seriously, guys, I think it's, I think you'll find that this experience that you went through together will create a bond for you guys with each other, and hopefully, I hope, with the school, you know, for forever.
One more question?
No, I just want to make a comment that kind of piggybacks what Patrick just said. So Alec was saying that the team has been hearing from past real world teams who've reached out to them to congratulate them, and they were really excited for them. So I think that goes along with exactly what you were saying.
Right.
Congratulations,
guys.
Congratulations.
So is this like, I'm sure, Mr. Barner, some of the board members maybe would like to look at this?
Yes,
Can we keep it on loan just for a little bit?
We're going to print another copy anay, so I should just keep it. We're going to print a copy that has the pages in the right order.
That's good. Congratulations. Nice job.
Guys. Great job.
Nice job. Thank you, Mr. Barner.
Thanks for your support.
Yeah, nice job. Nice job. Now that's a hard act to follow here, boy. Information and sharing.
Lost me at corn.
I know. No, that's not true. I know that's not true with you. So now Alec will do the announcements.
All right, we'll move on to our next agenda item, announcements. Norali, do you have announcements?
Yes, I do. So just to highlight a few things that are happening this week and in future weeks. So there's the South Burlington High School Student Council is sponsoring a blood drive tomorrow, and that's going to be from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. So we encourage everyone to donate. Orchard is also having a book fair and pizza night on November 20th. Rick Mark at Central School has their holiday program coming up Tuesday, December 16th at 9:30. And also there's some packed events coming up, like on December 4th at the Allenwood Senior Living Community. There's a Desert and Dialogue Night with the Allenwood residents and a performance by the UVM Top Cats. And also on the following Monday on December 8th at 6:30 to 8, there's Neighborhood Learning Conversations with John Painter, who's an SPHS educator, and that's just going to be dialogues as well. So moving on, I guess, to student report, just from a student perspective of the real world design team winning, we've been really receptive, and I think we've been so incredibly proud. It's been awesome just seeing them come back and seeing them do that, and have Mr. Burke's tweets, live tweet the event over the weekend. And I know that it was just like a really great moment for South Burlington to see this happening and to have them all come back with the first place. Also, it is at the South Burlington High School, it's DECA month, which is a business club, and so we're holding a lot of community events and school-wide events. So I know one of them, since next week is off and there's a lot of parent-teachers conferences, a lot of parents will be able to drop off their younger students for DECA to babysit while teachers go off into conferences.
Good, thank you.
A couple other just quick things. I know that there's a play going on, and that is titled Bring It On,
Yeah.
and that's going to be Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And a couple other quick things which we'll talk about more board, but we've got a change on our agenda for the January 21st will be a steering committee meeting. We'll be moving our board to our board meeting to the 22nd. And we'll talk about our board work session addition on December 1st later on. But thank you.
Great, thanks. All right, we'll move on to agenda item 7, the superintendent's report.
So I have in my report information on the Orchard School. I won't read that to you, but obviously you've been aware that we've had some issues around increased water table, and then we had a smell that obviously started in one of the classrooms. We worked to we moved the teacher in the classroom, we eradicated the situation, and then we have a further issue around trying to deal with the water table. So we have, what you have in front of you is some general preliminary information around the cost to do some engineering work around the perimeter of the Orchard School in the form of perimeter drainage, et cetera, to try to bring that water table well below the surface of the slab of the Orchard Foundation. So John has been working a lot on this particular issue along with Bart Maselli and Civil Engineer Associates. So you will have in front of you soon more detailed information. But John, I don't know if you want to add anything to our Orchard, our Orchard School and the high water table.
Sure, we have engineering plans and we've fast-tracked an RFP. Tomorrow there's a walkthrough of interested contractors, qualified contractors, and on Tuesday we've asked for bids back so that you, the board, can consider them at the December 3rd meeting. It's a job that we need to get done in December so that when the water table rises back up in the spring, the problem will be alleviated. I'm concerned about the cold weather we've been having, but I've been assured from the civil engineer that it's the best time to, given where we are, it's better to do it now than to wait, and that this amount of frozen ground won't be a big issue if we get it done in December. Don't know. We're going to get the bids back and we'll know what the cost is. It is not a budgeted item, so David's charged me with scouring the budget to find funds to accomplish this, and we'll have all that for you before we leave on Thanksgiving.
John, can you give us an idea of what the scope is, or what has to happen?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm going to build a wall, dig a trench,
I can,
put a
John.
pump
I
in.
think.
What are we going to do?
Okay. I mean, basically, if you think of all the structure around, immediately outside the building, if you go down to below right where the footings are, we don't necessarily know exactly what has existed from the initial construction of the Orchard School, but we don't think they're working. It's clear that there are some piping locations that are not large enough to handle any capacity that go out to the street. So it's a little bit of a collaborative effort along with the city as well around upgrading some of those locations, which are not going to be school expense responsibilities. But the bottom line is that we have a high water table that's not being dealt with, and it's right on the very close surface of the footings, foundational footing surface of the school. So if you dig down just a little bit there, you come to the water table. Now obviously as the year goes on, it goes up and down. But what we know is, as John said earlier, if we don't do it now, we are unsure of what the problem might be when we come to springtime. And we really want to try to avoid that at a time when we think this is likely the most appropriate time to do so. So perimeter drains all the way around, really the south side, and all the way around the perimeter of the outside. Obviously not the front of the school, but it's really everywhere else.
And the drainage will be into the city's infrastructure somehow?
Yeah, there's a design that is being engineered, which is not all just one. There's some capacity overflow that will help it to go to, depending on the flow, will go to either one location or the other, but it will have that kind of redundancy that's needed. So, not something we expected. I think we've been dealing with this for quite a while. Probably there's examples maybe that now, provide evidence that it's been going on for quite some time, and so we're trying to make sure that this is a smart way to spend some dollars to eradicate the issue.
To which meeting will we see this at? Next one?
Yes, our next December
December 3rd.
3rd
right.
meeting, yep.
And you'll need action at that point?
Definitely. But you will have at least a summary of bids and the plans, like I say, right before Thanksgiving, Wednesday before Thanksgiving.
I mean, the last thing on this, I want to just make sure it's clear, when we move the teacher, I mean, really important, we want to make sure we took care of, any concerns around the smell, so we were very diligent, John, Bart, all of the, we had testing agency come in and make sure that the environment was, was what it was it appropriate, yes or no, so we went through all of those measures, and I know sometimes, there's often concerns that can arise from students, parents, staff, teachers, et cetera, and so the necessary steps were taken to do that, and I'm confident currently we're in a good place to move back into those locations, so long as we address this issue. So, anyway.
Okay.
The other additions is just the budget timeline, which is in there, and I think, again, you may want to talk a little bit more about our timeline. We currently, John and I, and the central office staff have met with all of our administrators, building administrators, for meeting 1 on the budget. We'd like to come back on the 3rd. We'll have some specific state data, and we'd like to be able to have a discussion with the board, our preliminary budget discussion of increases and decreases based on kind of where we are. The administrators have been very helpful with identifying where we are. We've worked, as you heard before, our longer range plan out to year 2020 and some of the things that we're wanting to accomplish, and then each school where they are specific to getting there, as well as some of the specific things that they have identified that they're trying to achieve as well. So this is again our communication to you, the board, around where we are with budget. I don't know if there's questions.
Do we have meetings in advance of, I guess, where a budget would be adopted of the Citizens Advisory Group, David?
We haven't yet plugged in the Citizen Budget Advisory Group, and so that's currently, John has done a nice job, I'm going to say, in delegating and getting some folks to be involved in that, and we're going to have to work with plugging those dates in. I don't know, John, have you had that conversation yet on where
I had it with your administrative assistant today.
Oh, good.
And you're plugged in.
Oh, geez, thanks.
There's the Tuesday after the board meeting, I think it's the 9th, and the Thursday after the second board meeting, which is the 18th of December, are 2 meetings that are scheduled. And then we'll judging by the group, we'll have something in January around the 7th. A lot of times it's more effective after the board meeting because of the communication. It's a little funny giving it to the citizens group before the board hears it and administrators hear it. So, but yes, there'll be time. And we have a number of people who've been suggested, and in the next couple of days I'm going to contact people. So we're, as you know, we're now done with negotiations, and it's opened up some time to really do this effectively, I think.
And then the board does have a dedicated meeting on the 1st as well that I assume we'll talk about that agenda, but my guess is it'll be largely dedicated to budget development.
Yep, and then some of the things on your future agenda items that you'd like to take away some of those checks. Yeah.
Any other questions or comments on the budget timeline? Okay.
And again, thank you, John. And then the added one or amended item was on the high school and the middle school elevator project. Currently, middle school elevator project outside is soon to be wrapped up. We're waiting to get all of the component parts installed on the inside. And then the high school is a whole different animal, and I know that we've had initial meetings with Patrick and some of his group our architects, John has been shepherding that through. That's a much more elaborate situation, but there's some timelines here that are really, really critical, similar to Orchard, although it's not a crisis. It's in order to get it done and be ready for the next year. The timelines in place are very, very strict in order to get the magnitude of the work done. So, John, can you give a little bit more specific detail on the high school?
Sure, I was just looking it up. Last year at the December 4th meeting, we had the ADA report, and that provided a guide, and we then went and in the budget plan to go to the voters to free up those bond proceeds. So a year into it, we've completed the 2 roofs that were on the plan. The high school or the middle school elevator is everything's done essentially except for the unit to be put in place, and that's a big part of it. So it's, but the outside, the shell is ready. The high school windows has been an issue with PCBs, which we discussed at length this summer, and between our environmental engineer and our architect, we have, by the end of the month, we'll have a new RFP to go out. It'll be revised. The scope will be a little bit less because there's less money with testing and that kind of thing. Our high school, David alluded to it, but we've tried to keep in, Patrick's been involved and our athletic director will be involved as far as things that have to move. So not only is the elevator being put in, but we're putting in access where it needs to be. And the elevator is about twice the size that one we have now. So there are some things that have to move. And there's probably some budgetary items that'll go into the next year after July 1 that'll supplement that. I'm trying to have that together for the 3rd so that we see the bigger picture.
I mean, again, I think the push here around the 3rd is that we've kind of done the backward planning, you know, to open and be ready, and we have definitely a need to have a working elevator in that school. And so in order to meet that timeline for next year, you backwards plan, give yourself a little bit of buffer and not much, means we have to start soon. And that's the push really, to have it in front of you. You'll get a chance to see some additional information around the changes, but as John alluded to, you're making the current elevator shaft, which is in the middle of the building, you got to make it bigger so you can understand the complexity of what's entailed. So we want to make sure all students, all staff, all community members are able to get from point A to point B in our buildings, and this is a definite area of concern, particularly at the high school. So many programs run in different places for students and staff, community. It's an absolute must that we keep that up and running. So here's some of our due diligence around backwards planning, and Patrick and his staff have been very helpful as this kind of unfolds. So that's all I have on my report. Elizabeth.
All right, any questions? Great, we'll move to agenda item 8, the ratification of agreement between the SBEA's Educational Support Professional Unit and the South Burlington School Board.
Well, to get it on the table, I'll make a motion that we ratify the agreement, between the South Burlington Educators Association, Educational Support Professional Unit, and the board.
I'll second that.
All right, we'll open it up for discussion.
Well, let me just explain briefly some of the highlights of the terms of this particular agreement. It would be a 3-year agreement. The net percentage increase in new money over 3 years would be 9.44%. The reason it is 9.44% is in part because there's an increase in the premium contribution that the staff will make. Currently it is 5%. In the current year, 2015, it would remain at 5%. In 2016, it would go to 6%. And in 2017, it would go up to 7%. The total new money that will be put towards the salaries over 3 years is $278,715. We get a couple of other things, actually a number of different terms were modified in the contract. I won't go into detail about those. It's about daily administration issues that we largely were deferring to the administration as far as those particular changes in the contract language. But one overarching achievement of the agreement is it smooths out the salary increases, the incremental increases on an annual basis for individuals. Right now, somebody can work for 5 years without really any raise, and then all of a sudden they get a step, well, it's not called step, it's called years of service increase after 5 years, and it's fairly significant money, but during those 5 years they didn't get that incremental movement. So this smooths it out and has 20 incremental movements. Once somebody reaches 20 years, they're on that particular wage, except for annual increases to the base salary. So I think that's most of the highlights. Is there something that David or Diane you wanted to add about?
No, I think that covers it. I would just like to comment in general that, you know, it was a very respectful, positive dialogue. You know, we had a lot of conversations, and I think as a board member, it's really helpful for me to hear about the different roles that people play in the district, and everybody makes a contribution to the excellence of this school district. And whenever I have an opportunity to hear about what people do, it's just it's a wonderful thing, because everybody has a role to play. And I would just like to thank everybody in this bargaining unit for the contributions that they make to the district, and I'm happy that we came to an agreement.
And that does remind me, one item I did miss is that our librarians now have essentially a new job that we've been defining what that role is over the last couple of years, and they have a new job description. And so they're moving into a new position which pays a little bit more as well, and that's library media technicians is what they are going to be from here on out.
And Martin, you may have clarified this, but can you, net of the increased healthcare contributions by employees, what's the total money over the 3 years associated with the
total
changes?
money amount is $278,715. Of that, most of the money had to go into this first year to change from those every 5-year increments to smoothing it out. And $144,000 of that $278,000 is already was found or covered in our current budget. So next year, it'll be an additional incremental $67,000, which, if you want to translate that into property taxes, is about 1/4 cent. And the following year is equivalent, $67,000 as well.
Good. Any other questions, discussion? Okay, thanks to Martin and Diane for spearheading that, along with the administrative team. Appreciate your efforts. We have a motion and a second. Are we ready to take a vote? All in favor?
Aye.
And the motion passes. Thank you. Thanks for the hard work. Good. All right, we'll move on to agenda, I think I'm calling it 8A. And I wanted to share with the public this. The board has had a lot of discussions about transparency, and we work at the pleasure of the community that votes us in. The board has made the decision to make the community aware of a specific issue. The board has been named in a grievance that has been filed by the SBEA, the South Burlington Educators Association, contending that I, as board chair, the board, and administration has violated the district's grievance procedures. The grievance itself will be handled in the normal manner and responded to by our superintendent as such. But I did want to just inform the public of the nature of the response that the board made in September. An email was received in August of this year by the superintendent, which was shared with the board, that suggested ill intent on the part of the board in awarding the Ted Manazar Award at convocation. and suggested that the timing, and this is a quote, "The timing of this award is all the more troubling as it gives the appearance that the board is trying to compromise, parens, a specific teacher's, end parens, as a member of the negotiating team for the SBEA," end of quote. I responded on behalf of the board in September, and I want to read my specific comments at this time. I am writing on behalf of the board to respond to a statement in your August 21st, 2014 email to David Young regarding this year's Manazar Award. The board is more than highly disturbed by the comment in your email that it's making the award to a teacher gives the appearance that the board is trying to compromise this individual's position as a member of the negotiating team for the SBEA. By this comment, which was apparently shared with the teacher, you and the association have, 1, shown your lack of awareness of the process that attends selection of the award's annual recipient, 2, significantly diminished the honor that goes with the award for this individual, and 3, attributed to all members of the board a willingness to corrupt the integrity of a respected award for unrelated purposes. The Manazar Award is administered by a committee that consists of all principals, assistant principals, and central office administrators. This committee identifies possible recipients and selects the employee to receive the award based on specific written criteria, and there was a copy attached to my letter. The board is then informed by the committee through the superintendent of its recommendation, and the board grants the award. Board members have not and do not attempt to influence the committee's action. For this reason, the committee selected this teacher based on outstanding work with students. The board implemented the committee's decision. You and the association should affirmatively withdraw your comment and consider an apology to the teacher and the board for making the comment. In the future, you should exercise greater care and judgment before making claims that attack the individual accomplishments of district employees and the professional integrity of its elected officials. And I signed that dated September 18th and sent that on behalf of the board. So I wanted to make the public aware of that in the interest of transparency, and also to inform you that the superintendent will respond through the normal grievance process after this point.
Just to add, I'm not sure it's clear what that grievance against the board is, and it's my understanding the grievance against the board is that we were getting involved in a grievance that was brought by sending that letter. And we felt that, in fact, that letter was addressing a comment that was made in an email that was not part of what was going to become a grievance. Is that kind of summarized?
And nor was it part of the grievance, which was ultimately filed.
Right,
correct.
Right, nor was part of the grievance, so.
Yeah. So not the most pleasant part of our job, but we did want to make the decision to provide that in the interest of transparency. All right, let's move on to agenda item 9, administrative reports.
So we're lucky to have Patrick here again, or with us still. Yeah, we're always lucky to have you, Patrick. And obviously, we're lucky to have Mr. John Painter behind us as well. We have some items here that first out of the gate is the Rowland Foundation, which Mr. Painter's a Rowland Fellow. And so, I don't know, Patrick, if is it you or? Yep.
John, because I think, I know that you folks all know John, but I think since RETN is here, it probably is appropriate for me to just talk a little bit about Rowland and the fellowship that John has and the work he's doing on behalf of the school or in partnership with the school. So Rowland Foundation annually awards a small number of fellowships to teachers within the state of Vermont. Those teachers it's a pretty arduous process to get the fellowship, and then they kind of execute the plans that they put in place. And John's going to talk a little bit about where he is in terms of the execution of his plan. It's the fellowship is really a school teacher or school individual partnership, because the school's made some commitments in terms of John's plan and working together. in the years after his fellowship. And so this is actually the second year in a row that South Burlington High School has had a Rowan Fellow, which is, we're not the first school to have two, but we're the first school to have two in a row. And so it's been a real significant shot in the arm for us in terms of an incredible amount of work that we have to do connected to a multitude of areas. And so simply put, I feel like we've got one of the smartest, most engaging professionals in Vermont right now, serving as like our R&D department, and then reporting back to us and working with students and parents and community members in our school quite a bit, and then around the state. And John's going to talk about that. So, John Painter.
Thanks for that introduction, Pat. And thank you, Board, thank you for inviting me to give you an update on this. I'm really excited about the work that I'm doing this year, and I really enjoy the opportunity to tell people about it and to share about it. And so I'm just going to get started. Part of my fellowship actually my project has two separate parts. And part of my fellowship involves working with the Fly and Ryan Foundation, which was founded based on the life of a South Burlington grad. He graduated in 2004. And that work really is based around a program that we have at South Burlington High School, by which we ask our students, specifically all of our sophomores, to write up their list of core values. Essentially, they are the things by which they make their decisions and they base their actions on in their daily lives. And what I like to tell students when I introduce this, I don't like to call it an assignment. It really is essentially an assignment, but when I assign this project to students, I like to tell them that your core values are not necessarily exactly who you are and what you do, but it's really where you want to be when you are your best self. And so it's really about a process and about a journey, and to be able to know what's at your center and what's at your core when you're making decisions. So we have all of our sophomores do that. They identify their core values and then they share them. Many of you have probably sat in on some sophomore presentations. The program is relatively new. It's in its third year this year, and it's based on an assignment that one of our English teachers, Hannah Dransfield, actually wrote several years ago. I actually did the assignment myself before we asked our sophomores to do it. I feel like we should do that as educators. We should be able to do what we ask our students to do. And I thought, boy, it's going to be really easy. You know, I'm not that old, but I'm old enough to know what's important to me, and I'm a pretty principled guy. And it took me a long time to come up with a list that I was satisfied with. And so it was quite a task. And so I think to ask our sophomores to do it is it's a really big ask for us, but they do a great job with it. So that's what we have at South Burlington, and part of my project is to bring that program to other schools around the state of Vermont. And so my project got a little bit sidetracked by Make a Difference Day, which if you were reading the Free Press in late October, you probably followed along with that a little bit. The Gannett Foundation sponsors a National Day of Community Service in late October. This year it was the 25th. And they applied, the Free Press Media applied for a grant and got it. And they're allowed to then give that to a local nonprofit to work on a Make a Difference Day project. And lucky for us, it was the Fly and Ryan Foundation. So we mobilized schools around Chittenden County. As a matter of fact, it was every school in Chittenden County except one participated in this event and did some really incredible stuff. We had students from South Burlington actually participating in the event by helping out the Spooky Saturday event at the Vermont PBS Studios. But schools like Winooski did a really big food drive. Milton High School did a really big food drive. As it turns out, their food shelf was empty. Peter Hawks, who is Ryan's dad and the executive director of the Fly and Ryan Foundation, and I went and spoke at Milton, and they really did. I mean, they turned Make a Difference Day into Make a Difference Week. It was pretty spectacular. And I found out at our presentation that their food shelf was empty, and they really did a great job they had a Stuff the Bus event on Saturday. But needless to say, it got our foot in the door. Oh, bummer, my remote is not working. So I guess I'm not that far away, so I'll just keep it.
Bragging about it.
I know, I was so excited to use it. It was working. All right, so anyway, it really opened the door for us at schools where we didn't have an in yet to bring the Decisions program to them, because we essentially did a double punch. Saturday, of course, schools aren't in session, so it's really hard to reach the student body in general. So we actually on Friday hosted Core Values Days at the participating schools. during which students had been presented with the idea of the foundation and Ryan's core values, and then were given the opportunity to share their core values publicly. So at South Burlington High School, we had the Key Club sponsoring the event in the lobby during lunches, and students were invited to come by and write up their core values. In our freshman advisory slam, they had watched the video, and several of them actually had already written core values and came and just posted them in the lobby. And then students also were engaged in the conversation on Twitter, so it was a really cool event. So the idea was get students around Chittenden County to identify what's most important to them on Friday, to then go out and act on Saturday, because that's really the idea, is you're inspired to write them, and then you're inspired to act on them. So it was a really successful time, and because it was sponsored by the Free Press, we got tons of media coverage, which was great. So move that into the next phase, which is now back into my project, bringing the decisions program to schools around the state of Vermont. What I've got here in this first box are schools that we're working directly with right now who have committed and said, we really want this program in our school next year. So you can see Colchester, Winooski, Milton. Essex High School, we already have a meeting to go and address their faculty in December and really get things going, so we're very excited about that. And then People's Academy Middle School. We were able to generate some interest at the Rowland Foundation Conference, which was in the end of October. This is a piece of a flyer that we put out during that conference. And we had probably somewhere between half a dozen and 10 schools voice interest, and we've reached out to all of those schools, and some of them are starting to get back to us. What we're finding, of course, is what's slowing us down is just this whole communication, and people are very busy, and they're interested, but they're very busy. What I'm excited about is we're also starting to bring it to elementary schools. A very good friend of mine teaches at Shelburne Community School, and he and I were talking about it, and he said, I think this would be a good fit for our leadership council, our 5th grade leadership council. And so they've already started doing it. And their middle school principal, it's an elementary middle school, I guess there, is very interested in translating that up now to their middle school as well, which is pretty exciting. And so I've reached out to that person. It's also happening here in South Burlington. I sat down just recently with Mark Trafilio and one of their guidance counselors to talk about how we can make it happen at Orchard Elementary. And we're also interested in seeing if we could maybe pilot it at Orchard, probably with 5th graders, maybe with 4th graders. We're still working out the details, but then to expand it to perhaps all the elementary schools, and then of course up to the middle school here where we're standing right now. So it's a really exciting project, and we at South Burlington at the high school as well have the opportunity through my next phase of my project, looking at advisory, to reconsider maybe how we do it and how we could maybe grow that as well, maybe down to 9th grade and up through the 11th and 12th grade years, since we focus on that in 10th grade. So I'm going to start speaking about the second aspect of my project, which is looking to design advisory for 9th through 12th graders at the high school. Currently, as you're probably aware, we have an advisory program for freshmen, SLAM, and an advisory program for sophomores, which we aptly named Sophomore Advisory. When I had the opportunity to get started on this project, I talked with a couple of different people. We had Eagle Rock School come in and do some PD for us at the end of last year. And also Chuck Scranton, who's the executive director of the Rowland Foundation. And I said to them, I'm really looking for schools that are just hitting it out of the park with advisory, whether it's regionally or nationally. And I bet you guys have like, you know, a whole folder full of these names. And both of them said, yeah, it's not really happening much around not only the region, not only the state, the region, but pretty much around the country as well. And so I think here with 9th and 10th graders, I think we're doing a pretty good job with it. And just recently, we had a steering committee meeting during which my thinking around how we do 9th and 10th grade advisory really started to get challenged by the discussion. And I started to think about how we could maybe reinvent that a little bit to make it better for all students, which was it was just such a great experience for me, because up until this point, people have said, oh, well, what should we do with those? And I essentially said, well, I really like those, so let's just put them over here, and we'll start working with the 11th and 12th graders, and that's really where we need to do the work. And it's really exciting to start thinking about how we can take the work that we're thinking about for 11 and 12 and expand it 9-12. Anyway, what I have here on the background is what's called a wall on Padlet.com, and we're starting conversations online, which is essentially a big piece of easel paper with sticky notes, but now online. And what's nice about this is, first, when I leave the meeting, I don't leave a trail of sticky notes behind me when I'm taking the papers away. But also is that the conversation can continue outside of the meeting, and people can join in on the conversation if they're not at the meeting. And so that's what you see here. These are notes from our last steering committee meeting, which was on Friday. But just to give you a little bit of a heads up on how I'm doing the work, obviously working with the steering committee, as I mentioned, but also working with what we call our TLCs, which is our professional learning community, TLC standing for teacher learning community, which we just met this morning. And we're continuing to focus on what the content should look like for our junior and senior advisory, what's appropriate. And so we had a great meeting today to continue this. We also need really the two big things when I think about advisory in terms of how are we going to make it happen at South Burlington. The first question is the content, which we're talking about with these groups right here. Really then the second question is the structure. How's it going to fit? Where, with our schedule, with our building, with our teachers, how are we going to staff it? And so I'm in the process of designing some think tank retreat days, which are going to happen there's going to be one in late January, where it's going to be a bit of a pressure cooker, and I'm going to ask people to come up with a product by the end, ideally 4 products that they'll be able to present to each other. I'll take them back to these groups right here for some discussion. I'll work on them for a month, and then we'll come back probably in late February and do it again and revisit those ideas. And so that's where we'll work on the structure. And then finally, I met today with the leaders. We have a PLP TLC that meets at the same time as our advisory TLC does, and it actually looks like we're going to really weave those two groups together. Well, we might not meet together every time. We're pretty much looking to house PLP and advisory. That seems to be what makes sense. And so that's what's happening in terms of the work that we're doing so far. A little bit more, here's a picture from our most recent advisor roundtable meeting. Steering committee meeting. In terms of gathering more information, I'm going to host a couple of roundtable days at the school. You can see that they're listed here. This one's in blue because it's a blue day at school. I presented to the faculty this morning, although I didn't really get to this presentation today. But I would invite you to come in and take part in that discussion. It's going to be in the district conference room, and it's going to happen all day. And so I would love to have people come in and take part in that discussion. It will also take place online. And so I'll be gathering information not only from teachers, ideally from students. As a matter of fact, on this day, the 11th of December, the first hour and a half will involve my class. I teach a peer leadership class on that day. And so we'll be engaging those students in that discussion as well. And then hopefully also community members. In terms of engaging community members, you heard Nirali speak about the neighborhood learning conversation training that's happening December 8th. You can see the date right there. We're going to revive the network that Jason Kushner set up last year through his Roland work, and I'm doing that with the assistance of PACT and Susie Merrick, and we're really excited to engage the community and start having conversations. First of all, just to inform folks and say, hey, this is something that we're working on, and then to get information from them and say, so what are some things that you might envision that we should tackle or consider when we're looking at content for juniors and seniors in advisory as well. I've also sent out a statewide advisory survey to schools around the state of Vermont. Pretty disappointed right now. I only have 12 responses, although I told someone that today and they're like, wow, that's pretty good. But it's only been like a week and a half, so maybe I'm a little impatient. But the idea is to really find out what advisory looks like everywhere else. There's not really a database for that in Vermont. And I really feel like it's appropriate, especially now with Act 77 and the idea of managing PLPs and the potential of student-led conferences. A lot of these things that's a perfect fit for advisory. And so if a school doesn't have advisory in Vermont, what I'm finding is, at least with my 12 results, they're saying, yes, we need to have one. And then what they're saying is if our advisory doesn't, right now the structure is not going to be able to house PLP, we need to change it to house PLP. And so that'll be really good information, not only for us, but I think for the state of Vermont in general. So stay tuned for that. And also I'm meeting with, ideally, MMU tomorrow, although I didn't have an email before our meeting today, and also with CVU on Friday to take a look at how we might be able to, as South Burlington community, go out there and visit. And so I will keep you posted on those visitation days. I believe actually we're looking at potentially going to CVU, I think it's December 17th, which is a Wednesday. So if you are interested in joining us for the site visits, I'd be happy to have you guys join us. These two schools right here, Pittsfield and Souhegan, are both in New Hampshire. I have a message from Pittsfield actually today. They've got a great advisory program and they house student-led conferences, which is essentially like an exhibition. and like our sophomore exhibition. So I think we'll probably get out there and visit them. And Sauhegan is the school we visited, it's probably about 10 years ago now, and we based our sophomore advisory program on their very successful program. So I'd like to reconnect with them as well. So invite all of you to consider joining us on those site visits. So finally, here's a way that you could join in. First of all, if you would like to host a neighborhood learning conversation, would really love to have you hop on board with that and join our training on the 8th. So if you received the emails from Susie, from the PAC network, you're probably already aware of those things, but we would love to have you guys host a conversation, a neighborhood learning conversation. I started blogging this year. It's something that's new to me, and the folks at the Roland Foundation really said, you should really blog your work so that people can follow you online. And I got really excited about it, and I blogged once, and I was like, all right, that was good. And then I blogged twice, and that was it. So if you were to look at my blog, there's not much there yet, and I thought there's going to be time for me today to do it before the meeting, so I can say, and I blogged today, but there wasn't. But stay tuned, because I'm really trying to get there. What I'm finding is it's just, it's busy. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of really great work, but it's busy. And then finally, I do connect my Twitter to my blog, so every now and then when I do post, it's out there as well. So we'd love to hear from you, to have you join in the conversation, whether it's online or right at our neighborhood learning conversations or our site visits. So, and at this time, if you have any questions, I'll take those.
Thank you, John.
Yeah.
I will make a comment, John. I had the opportunity, and Patrick as well, to participate in 2 days of the Green Mountain Imperative, which involved about 200 individuals around the state meeting, really, I think, talking about education reform, kind of public education in the broadest sense. And there were a lot of similarities, I think, to the work that you're doing and working to implement. And notably, to me, was student voice was very present, as it is in your sessions. And then the implementation of personalized learning plans and what that means to how public education is delivered in the state on a going forward basis is clearly going to be how education gets defined in the future. And I think the work you're doing is really incorporating that redefinition. I don't know, Patrick, if you wanted to add to that.
I completely agree, and no, I have some information for Stuart and I do with regard to proficiency-based graduation requirements, et cetera, and so that we'll circle back into PLPs a little bit during my part of that presentation, but yeah, I completely agree. It's like all of these, thank goodness, all of these initiatives are aligned in a sense, and so yet there's still like a lot of work to do in each one of the buckets, but at least the work is aligned. And you know, again, I mean, we're pretty lucky to have John out there doing good work for Flying Ryan, and also pushing pushing us to have some conversations about what our advisory is going to look like, and how we're going to, I don't want to say shoehorn, but how we're going to include the personalized learning plans into that model. So
yeah.
So my son came home, he's a sophomore, and he said, Mom, did you know they're having sophomore advisory in junior and senior year too? Well, wouldn't be called sophomore advisory, but can you talk at all about sort of that expansion idea of
what the content might look like?
Yeah, going from sophomore to junior, senior. Yeah.
Right now, we're really in the thick of starting to develop what that might look like. And so having this recent steering committee meeting on Friday and then my TLC today, we're in kind of the information gathering stage in terms of what we would like advisory to look like at South Burlington and what's going to make the most sense for students. You may have seen on the slide that had the Padlet wall up there, it said at the top, purposeful work, and the idea is, I was talking with somebody about it this morning. There's a phrase that came up in one of my discussions with somebody last week. The idea for me is, okay, so when we have advisory, it's for students 9-12. It's something that all students will attend. But I really think it would be important for us to think this way instead. What if the advisory 9-12 program that we have was optional? Students could opt in or out. How can we design then the content, what we're going to be doing with our students, so that they'll really want to come? So that if they were given the option, they would opt in. How can we give them that kind of opportunity? And it's a simple question, but I think it's a really hard question to answer as well, because what I definitely think we as South Burlington High School as the faculty, we definitely don't want to give them something that's just an add-on or something that, okay, I got to go do that and check the box today. We really want it to be purposeful. We really want it to be something that's going to serve them well. So it's a long process. Ideally, I would like to see us spend some time revisiting the sophomore portfolio, which is likely to become a component of a PLP, and so then the revisit just becomes a very natural process in the junior and senior year. There have been all kinds of ideas expressed. You could actually see them, and I can share those walls with you, the Padlet walls with you, and then you can start to investigate them. But we've had conversations about taking the sophomore roundtable that the students invite and having that be a group that maybe follows the student to a presentation they do in their junior year or their senior year as a support group. That's a, hey, here's an idea. Right now we're throwing a lot of stuff against the wall to see whether or not it sticks. There have been discussions just recently about, okay, so what if instead of having advisory that was same grade as we have right now, what if our advisory groups turned into mixed grade? Maybe 9-12, maybe only 11-12, and keep the 9-10. So right now, what we're not doing is we're not confining ourselves to what we have now and trying to fit what we're going to design to that model. What we're trying to say is, so we have this opportunity to rethink everything. So let's not confine ourselves just to that, and let's rethink everything. Who knows, when we're done rethinking, maybe we'll stick with what we have 9-10. It's likely going to change since we're putting PLP in advisory anyway, but to at least think outside of that framework to maybe generate some bigger ideas like the guys in the Real World Design Challenge did. So we're still kind of in the baby and the infancy phases of starting to think about content, but a lot of discussion around post-secondary exploration and planning, whether it's college or career, those types of things for juniors. There's been a lot of discussion around wellness and for juniors as well, since it's a very heavy academic year. There's a lot of pressure. There's been a lot of discussion around, say, maybe in the fall of the senior year, maybe their content might be focused on helping them, finalize their post-secondary plans, whether it's with essay writing workshops or things like that. So all kinds of ideas that we're talking about to hopefully do things that are meaningful for students in that place. So. A lot of work to do still. Yeah.
Other questions?
Great.
Thank you, John.
Thank you for having me. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, John.
All of these acts are like really, we're just filling up all of our good work buckets, John, and thank you very much. So,
Want to go ahead?
Yeah.
I'm going to stay here because Patrick may be using the
got it.
screen. So.
Yeah. So one of the things, I've had this actually on here a bit, and again, we're happy to have Patrick here. Not that Patrick won't come when we ask, but he's got a lot of things going on which I think are in line with board direction, board ends. You're hearing some of those tonight. One of those, that I'd like him to comment on, and again, we're still in the ongoing conversations, but I think has been a really successful conversation, communication, and activity, is around our work with UVM as a partner. And so I wanted him to just, touch on that for you and answer any questions that you might have as we, again, begin to look at all of what you heard with, with the students of Real World Design and John. But I think here's another pathway into some of that similar work, again, that Patrick and the high school are working on. So, Pat, if you will.
Yep, so I'll just give you some kind of background information and then ask me questions. I think it's the best way to go. One of the things that we've been able to do at SBHS in the last dozen years is really significantly increase the number of students that we have involved in our advanced placement program. And so advanced placement is really a dual enrollment program where kids take high school classes in college. Kids take college classes in high school, and it's been going on for a long time, since I was in high school. So it is kind of the dominant dual enrollment opportunity for kids throughout the country. And so in the last 5 to 7 years, higher ed's been paying attention to the AP program, and there's been around the country moves towards either early college programs or what are called dual enrollment programs that are offered in partnerships with actual universities, as opposed to the kind of equivalency model by way of the College Board auditing coursework to make sure that it's at the college level. So AP is an audited program that the College Board audits that says, yes, this is college level work. All of our AP classes go through an AP audit. All of our AP teachers go through an AP audit, et cetera. Now, this developing model is this dual enrollment model where students are able to access courses at a specific university by way of dual enrollment. There's advantages and disadvantages to each. One of the disadvantages to the on-campus university-affiliated dual enrollment model is despite our, somebody told me one time we're a 9-iron away from UVM, despite our incredible proximity to the university, there's significant misalignment in terms of course schedules, transportation schedules, even like the calendar, somebody told me the more you pay, the less they go, which you'll experience next year, Julie. And I think, so there's like these long breaks, and they're finished in May, and they start earlier than we do. So we were figuring out, or we came to figure out in the early years of the dual enrollment program, which was a voucher system where the high school kids got vouchers so they could just go, that it really was just getting at a certain segment of our student body that on some level was really able to access that level of programming anyway. So what we wanted to do was try to get at that next band of students and really increase our participation in the, university-affiliated dual enrollment program. And so what we discovered through our own kind of low-level research through the guidance department, et cetera, was that the students really want to work it into their schedule on our campus. And so that's when we started talking about, well, if we're running these AP programs we already know the college level is there, then why can't we create some kind of hybrid program where our AP programs will either become dual option programs, so a student could take it for AP or take it for dual enrollment, or they could take it for both credit. And so we started a conversation that Dave helped us with, kind of got our foot in the door with UVM. And UVM was particularly interested in having this conversation in two areas, in statistics and in what they call their STEM Bridge program. So the STEM Bridge program, that's science, technology, engineering, and math, and that's a program that we're working on with them, whereby our students who are taking calculus right now, this is where I have to start talking slowly because this is where we're still in the planning phases and we're still reacting to each other in terms of institutions. But right now, our students in calculus, AP calculus, will have an option spring semester to enroll in what's called Calc 21, which is a UVM course, and then they will get 3 or 4 UVM credits for Calc 21. They'll have a UVM transcript that will say they have taken Calc 21. Their credit will be based on their passing Calc 21. It will become part of their permanent academic record, et cetera. In statistics, we've also been able to move pretty quickly down the road that our students are going to be able to, even quicker actually, our students are in statistics or AP statistics are going to have the same opportunity. You might find it interesting, I did, that statistics and math or statistics and engineering, those are 3 different departments at UVM, and those departments operate almost as if they're independent entities unto themselves. So that was all kind of a new experience for us. So in statistics, things are going along really smoothly, and then in other places, there's a lot of questions being asked, and so we're just discovering that it really is dependent on which one of those 3 places and which department head we're talking to and the availability of professors, et cetera. So, but I think I've talked enough to give you the vision of that, and we feel like if we can crack the nut in those areas where UVM is interested in creating these connections, which really are science, technology, engineering, and math, that then we can say, okay, if we can do this here, can we do this, you know, with Shakespeare, and can we do this with other courses where we already have some alignment with what's going on at UVM. The advantage to the students, obviously, is they can earn college credit while they're still in high school. So,
Patrick, can you touch this a little bit around, like, you know, developmentally on campus, kids here?
Yeah.
But there's some opportunities that I think you shared that are really important about, you know, migrating to the university developmentally.
I mean, what we'd like is for and you know, I don't know what this is going to be like this year, but what we'd like is for it to be a course where the students, you know, they sign up for it. It's like Blue 4. It's on their schedule. They're getting comfortable. They get used to the content, and then all of a sudden it's like, hey, we're actually meeting at UVM, you know, next week, and oh, we're going to access their lab the next week, and the week after that we're going to, you know, these are almost like, they're not like field trips. They're just course meeting that's taking place at the university. And so, you know, UVM is very interested in having our students on campus, and then they're also interested in having some shoulder-to-shoulder instruction, UVM professors with our teaching professionals. And so included in all of these conversations with those 3 different entities is how are we going to do that, and I think it'll go really smoothly in some, and in others we're going to kind of learn as we go. The engineering bridge is actually pretty interesting because we don't have an engineering course at SBHS right now, so it wasn't that situation where we said, oh, let's align our engineering course with your you know, survey of for like intro to engineering, and so actually a group of teachers from South Burlington, CVU, Mount Mansfield, and Essex are working with UVM professors to design that course. So next year when we launch that one will have, you know, been from the ground up a dual enrollment partnership. But the other 2 are, you know, we're still kind of moving along with AP, and we're doing the dual enrollment.
So
yes.
Does the course that they take, AP Stats, at the high school count as one of their 2 allowed dual enrollment classes by law?
Only if they enroll in Calc 21. So what'll happen is, because Calc 21 is a semester course,
right?
And so sometime around the turn of the semester for the university students, which is after winter break, our students will have to decide, are you going to enroll in Calc 21? Are you going to enroll in whatever this Stat 21, I don't know what the
Stat 111, yeah.
Stat 111. And if our students do, then yes, they have to use their voucher, or they have to pay the discounted UVM rate, whatever that is, I forget what it is. There's like a gifted and talented rate for UVM if they've already used their vouchers. And so, but a student could stay in AP Stats and not enroll in Calc 21 or not enroll in Stats 111 and just take the AP exam and use that for equivalency credit wherever they're going, et cetera. So,
and I think, as Patrick said, we have, you know, things are still moving along. We have great interest, but trying to get all of these groups kind of on the same page. They're in different places, different silos perhaps. I think there's a willingness to do that. I know on kind of the structure and pay, dual enrollment cost, how that gets worked out. I have a meeting coming up before the break, actually, to talk a little bit more deeply about that. From our initial meetings, actually, with Patrick was with me, along with you know, some of his folks, to talk about this. Again, very exciting. I think important benefit. We didn't talk about the higher ed benefit, but obviously they have, you know, secondary students in the chairs or in programs that are likely going to migrate into their university, perhaps. So,
I mean, who wouldn't want those 7 like real world design? I feel like UVM should be sitting outside their house trying to get them to attend.
I mean, there's a little great connection. It wasn't planned that way, but, you know, I think the board certainly heard from students this you know, on the real world design. You heard Susie and sharing some of this information. And, you know, our business partnership, which was a couple of weeks ago, right, Pat? I'm looking at Pat in the back, who was with VSAC. And, you know, our business partners around trying to kind of make this all work, where we talked a lot about PLPs, you know, with VSAC, and how do we get information down to the elementary moms and dads and guardians. So I don't know, you know, Pat used that word of triangulation a little bit, and certainly it seems to be alive and well.
That was one of my questions. Is the primary benefit to UVM kind of the pre-screening of potential enrollees, or kind of the what's in it for UVM? And I guess my other question is, what are other Chittenden County schools doing to address the dual enrollment issues that you've heard about, kind of from your peer group?
Yep. This model where we're offering the university classes on our campus is not widely practiced. You know, there's some of this that happens at Essex. It happens in tech centers quite a bit through equivalency credit with technical colleges, but it's not very common in what I would say our peer schools in Vermont. So, but the first part of your question, I mean, I think all of the institutions of higher ed are broadening their mission to include some upper level high school students. So I think that they're acting upon that more broad mission. I think that again, kind of going back to those young men who are here, I mean, you know, they're just a small subset of a really large number of students that attend my school in particular, and I think our peer schools that UVM would really like to keep in state. And so I think having these students on campus, and there's also a summer dual enrollment program that UVM runs, and I think that really makes it worth it for UVM. The other issue for us is that we know that it's those underrepresented first generation college kids, free lunch students. Those are the students that are not going to have the kind of social capital or maybe the support at home or whatever to to either ride the minivan up to their UVM course or to have a car on campus so they could shoot out during, when they have those classes. And so by bringing the classes to those students, we think we're going to increase access for them and, help save them money, make college more affordable for them, which I think is pretty significant, and demystify that whole college experience. I mean, there's nothing that gives you confidence in terms of, am I ready for college? Like getting a B+ in a college course. It's like, yes, you are. So
the other thing I would say is, I think UVM, what it's in it for me, I can't speak for them, but I believe this to be true. Patrick has 60 students currently involved in stats or calculus, I believe somewhere in that number, 59, 60. I think it's a great opportunity for UVM to say, that they have these number of students in this type of program that are involved, and at an expense that we're essentially paying the teacher. They're working with us on transcription, and I'm wanting to say that there's $1 here that they're currently drawing, as we know, from the Ed Fund, State of Vermont Ed Fund, as a public entity themselves, and I think there's a win-win for them, where they can say, in addition, we have 60 students that are also part of our cohort, obviously fractionalized, but still an important message. I think, as Patrick said, that matriculation for kids who sit there and say, at whatever developmental age, when they do visit the college or when they are doing, they can say, I can do this. That's huge, and I think that obviously, has a great benefit. I think right now in Vermont and again, the board has addressed this in your resolution language around the dual enrollment. We have to pay the amount to sustain that amount. We're not going to be increasing opportunities. We're going to have to cut them down because we're not going to be able to afford when you get to a certain end number. And I think certainly legislation has been playing with, we'll pay for it this year, but then it will be on you in the future years. We've been around that area, and that's not going to be in the best interest of student opportunities. So
the math is ironically, the math is pretty. It doesn't really work out, but we're hoping that by some of the work we're doing too, that we can continue to make the case that we should be able to do this for less money, or students shouldn't have to use their vouchers or whatever.
Well, and of interest with this summit for the last 2 days, there were guardrails on some of the conversation that really talked about kind of re-narrowing the mission of public education delivery consistent with the funding mechanism associated with Act 68, which is really a K through 12 mission, to broadening that and revisiting the funding mechanism to pre-K through 16.
Correct.
And those were, of the many things that were discussed, that was of interest to me to see the varying opinions on the guardrails of what we deliver and what we're committed to deliver. So,
what's the approximate number of kids that you have that actually would access dual enrollment apart from AP classes?
You know, I have that number, and what I'll do is, because I'm just starting budget, and I'm looking at, because we have to fold some of this into our budget now, so I've got a trend from the year that dual enrollment first started, you know.
Which was when? Do you remember?
It was like 4 years ago, I think. And so I've got how many of our students participated all the way up until now. And I'll probably take out any kids that go through our on-campus dual enrollment to come up with the number that you're talking about. But I don't want to give you the wrong number, but I know I can get you that number.
Okay.
Because I just got that report from guidance.
Okay.
And you know, we don't want to stop other kinds of dual enrollment. Like a lot of our students that access dual enrollment access courses that are not available at my school and will never be available. You know, Greek mythology. You know, I'm not going to have, you know, Greek mythology, you know, and if a student's interested in a course like that, they can, you know, so there's a lot of good elements to the, you know, kid going by themselves on campus through dual enrollment. I just want to make sure we're getting at that underrepresented population as much as we can. And you asked a question before, Julie, about do the kids have to use, and do I have any idea how many kids are going to sign up for like Stat 111 and Calc 21? When I first was putting this together, I was like, why would a kid not? You know what I mean? I was just sitting there thinking they're all going to do it. But I've come to learn that I don't think that's true. I'm not sure now how many students are going to or not. I think it'll be an interesting development over this year.
And do they know about it already? Like, do they know that in January or before January they have the option to do that?
Yes.
They do.
Yeah. There was a meeting too was it last week at night with you?
Yeah. And they, you know, basically the way they presented it to the kids were told about it in class as well, because I know my son didn't go to the meeting at night, but the way they presented it to us that night was that there's a timeline in accordance with the ad drop period. And the first exam happens before the ad drop, and the student can take the exam and really get a feel for how well they think that they can do, you know, and they'll have feedback. And it's after that, and it's, I think, like a week after the exam that they have to make that decision whether they'll do AP or withdraw from me.
You know, it's really interesting. I mean, not to get too far into the weeds, but like the curriculum alignment conversations between what Calc 21 is and what AP Calc is. And, you know, I've got my AP Calc people saying, well, we do a lot more than what they do in Calc 21. You know what I mean? And you've got the Calc 21 people saying, well, you've got to take our midterms and finals to make sure that, you know, there's this, you know, integrity to the partnership. And, you know, it's all good conversations, but it's interesting.
So I'm proud of the work that we're doing. I think you know a lot of the challenges that we have in funding right now, and, you know, that specific on the dual enrollment piece. I'm proud of the partnerships that we're doing, and you know, this is not just a UVM option, it's broader than that, but it's all really about helping our kids, or kids in general, have opportunities that are going to help them be successful, you know, in a career or college experience. And, you know, I'm proud of us asking the questions, Patrick and his staff, you know, wanting to reach out there. It's a little bit messy, I got to be honest with you, and sometimes the meetings, you know, in some of these larger meetings, we walk out and we say, oh, that's pretty clear. But then we find out that there's silos reestablished, and kind of those, you know, those things start to unfold, and thus we have to have another meeting to say, I don't think this was the initial intent. Can we get clarity again? And you know, we're going to keep working on that. And there's an awful lot of excitement as well, I would say, from our partners like UVM. So, thank you, Patrick.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And this was just about the UVM partnership. You know, there's dual enrollment happens.
Yeah.
CCV and through Champlain College, Burlington College, we have a lot of other things.
So moving on, proficiency-based graduation. Again, you're being inundated with kind of these positive things going on here, and our next steps. So we'll let Stuart, and I think Stuart and Patrick probably will chime in, as a lot of this has.
Well, he's going to talk about, yeah, they're kind of two separate presentations, but.
But Patrick and I don't have enough time in our lives to choreograph together, so we took different parts of this, some of which Pat may do again. I'm really just focusing in terms of proficiency-based graduation. So just a reminder that by 2020, all students in the state of Vermont will graduate based on proficiencies that are determined both in content by the local school district and by transferable skills, which the state has actually determined what these transferable skills are. So part of my job is, well, what does that mean for our ends? And so that's partly what my presentation is about. This is a draft. This is obviously something that eventually you're going to have to, one of the board's jobs is to set the proficiency-based graduation requirements, but also see where the dovetail is between the things that can't be changed, that is the transferable skills, which is different than the content. So we're going to talk a little bit about that right now. I'm going to try to be relatively brief, but not too brief. So the state of Vermont says that all students will have the following transferable skills. And those will be clear and effective communication, self-direction, creative and practical problem solving, responsible and involved citizenship, and informed and integrative thinking. And they talk about the fact that this needs to be built into the content. It's not a separate beast, but that these skills have been identified by the state and approved by the Board of Ed as part of the educational quality standards. Those are the transferable skills. So the state has put out, I just took one page, a document in which they said, clear and effective communication, what does that mean? Here are the performance indicators. Demonstrates organized, purposeful communication, evidence, integrate information, adjust communication. So I was looking at that, and I talked to the state, and I said, well, what does this mean for our ends? And what they said is, well, we could make our ends the performance indicators. We can't change the skills. So the first thing that I did, and I just, for your purpose here, this is just disposition for lifelong learning. And the red is, well, what is this an indicator of? So demonstrating independent thought, curiosity, and creativity is an indicator of self-direction, creative and practical problem solving, and informed and integrative thinking. So that by looking at our ends, this is really, the beginning of a dovetail of where we say, this is really where it fits. And so my next step, and this is a statement from the state, so that the EQs are the transferable skills that are woven throughout the South Burlington district ends. Using this model, students would have opportunities to demonstrate acquisition of these skills as part of attaining their transferable skill graduation proficiencies. I added the word South Burlington District. The rest was from the state. I just want to give credit where it's due. So I took the ends. Then next, here's our 4. This talks about, this is a statement from the state about transferable skills can be demonstrated separately, but they really should be demonstrated in the content in the courses and the work that people do. And I built a new model. So clear and effective communication, now responding to a variety of demands of audience, task, purpose, and discipline, which is lifelong learning 1.1.2. And for example, so the red one is the one I left out, the state. I sent this to the state, and they said, I think you should throw that one in too. But I'm not sure that we want to do J number of indicators for each thing. If you remember, theirs was only about 5 or 6 indicators. So that some of our work, if we go in this direction, would just say, well, which is the most, for that? And I've done that basically a crosswalk for all the things. So in self-direction, which obviously talks to a lot of our personal development skills, but not just personal development skills, because obviously, some of the citizenship skills as well, practicing ethical behavior in all environments. So this is a question, which ones totally fit? What are the best indicators? Creative and practical problem solving. So again, using our South Burlington ends policy as the indicators of what the state says are part of the graduation requirements. And that's basically the work that we're doing right now. At the level, this would be district-wide. One of the things is, in terms of proficiency-based graduation, obviously for a lot of reasons, this work has started at the high school because it's proficiency-based graduation requirements. But obviously, just like any other curriculum, if this is where a kid needs to be by 12th grade, well, where they need to be by 11th grade, where they need to be by 8th grade, where they need to be by 5th grade, some of the same conversations that we've always had about the ends and about Common Core curriculum. And in fact, we are participating. We got a grant. The state is running a major initiative. We are one of the selected districts. In order to do that, one of our elementary principals had to be involved. In fact, a few districts couldn't get their elementary people involved. They couldn't get the grant. And we're going to be doing some very key work and training this year. Pat, Lissa, Tim Weil from the high school, Karsten from here with special educator Kristen Romack, and Holly from Chamberlain and myself. And that also will begin to drive, and you'll be hearing more about that because part of that work is about how to dovetail policy work with the board as you move to the place where you're going to adopt those proficiency-based graduation requirements. So I'm done.
Perfect. So Patrick, it is getting set. I mean, we remain in uncharted territory. And, Stuart's work to date, although I think it's hard for you to grasp all of it, the effort here is to not just drop what we've been doing, obviously, but look at what are those essential skills that we identify in our ends, and how do we, first, is there any kind of overlap? If we didn't have any overlap, I think you'd be saying, we have problems. But we don't. We now need to be more logical about how we move forward. And again, that's really what Stuart addressed with the group of folks that are going to now take it from here. So I don't know if the board, Elizabeth, has any specific questions to Stuart before we move on to Patrick and the BBGR specific to high school, or
just the quick comment I'd make is, and I may be thinking of this out of context, but the work that was presented, I think it was referred to as the placemat.
Yeah.
I found that very helpful as an umbrella, and I'm wondering if maybe every time we have a conversation, we start with, I know that's going to get modified or cleaned up a little bit, but because we're also educating our community at the same time we're going through this ourselves, it may be helpful to kind of go back to something like that as our umbrella conversation. And then when we do the deep dive on whether it's EQS or PLP or whatever, we know where it fits within the bigger picture. And then just as a quick observation before you start, I am still not sure we were ahead of the game on developing ends, or if we're just catching up with what was happening anyway. And I'd like to think we were way ahead of the game, and that's why we're having a little bit of a challenge fitting work back to our ends. But I would always say to administration, if at some point the fitting of those together becomes more cumbersome than what we're trying to deliver to students, we need to just ask ourselves that question.
Well, Elizabeth, just since you asked that, I mean, there is sometimes when we just say, there they are, the transferable skills, the state just laid them out. Do we have the right indicators, whether we call it our ends or not, or whether those are our ends? So I do think that's a question. I can't change board policy, so that's what I'm working with, but it is certainly something that could be discussed, because what we want is, always is this thing of really making sure it really dovetails with the work that people have to do.
Yeah, and I mean, I know what went into developing the ends,
That's
and
right.
that it engaged community in a significant way. So I do think what we see in ends is reflective of what the South Burlington community expects.
And I also think if
we know change happens.
Right, and I also do think, though, if you really look at them and we really make the alignment, their indicators and our indicators, they're pretty close. There's
I
some
think
that
they're
are,
well
that aren't, you know, really there that they have, and some that,
Yeah.
but it's not a big stretch. It actually does make it fit in a way that was never, you know, totally clear where it all belonged.
So what reporting requirements is the state going to have with respect to those transferable skills? I mean, do we have to report to the state how we are measuring those and whether we're achieving them for our graduates?
I'm going to turn that over to Mr. Burke, because I think that will hit some of your
A little bit. I mean,
pieces, but
I
we
think
don't
it's a
know
good
yet
question.
what
Yeah.
it all looks like.
Right, because, and part of that is dovetailing from what Elizabeth was saying, because I'd rather not even think about changing our ends again, because I want to see them monitored rather than continuously changed to match whatever things are coming from the state. And to the extent that we can keep focusing on whether we're achieving our ends and using that as a proxy for whatever the state may want, unless the state is making a requirement that we do something else, you know, that's what I'd like to see us
No, I
do.
mean, that work is all vetted through the state that I just showed you. So the red ones were some of their suggestions, because they added more and I probably want to subtract less. But the fact is that before, I asked the question because Pat's going to talk to you about the content. So the state has a recommended content, and they've said that that can be accepted, modified, or rejected. But that's not the case with transferable skills. Those 5 transferable skills are in the EQS. They must be in some way, we don't know, how it all works together, what kids will graduate with, but what the indicators are, those really are up to the district. And so the indicators are our ends. At least that's what I'm proposing.
Right now, the two are working really well together. And that's what I think Stuart's presentation showed, is that I don't think, I mean, we may get to a point where you kind of look at the ends and say, gosh, there's something missing, or, gee, this isn't important anymore. It might come through this work, I'm not sure. I don't think so. It hasn't jumped off the page at me just yet. But there's a part of my presentation where I talk a little bit about how we have to pay attention to that. So I'm going to, I have a lot of information, but I'm going to try to move it along, but don't let my desire to move it along preclude you from stopping and asking a question. And there's a number of times during this presentation where I think you're going to want to ask me a question about something I'm just about to get to. So I might say, oh, I'm just about to get there, okay? So, so this is background information. You've, much like the placemat, you've seen some of these slides before. This is about the new EQS. They're almost not new anymore. We're still calling them new, but it's important to keep in mind that they relate to the Common Core state standards. And so if somebody says to you, well, we just started with the Common Core and now we're doing this EQS, and why there's too many initiatives, and they're completely related. This shifts graduation standards, again from the Carnegie unit, which was based on seat time, or number of hours in a course, to a proficiency-based academic progression and graduation standards. There's some mandates within the EQS that relate to personalized learning, as well as within Act 77, which is the act from which dual enrollment was born, as well as the personalized learning plan initiative that we are under. So again, this is a slide you've seen before. It talks about this. I was here updating you about the rules as they were in process and EQS as they were being contemplated, and then the EQS passed. There was some lack of clarity the last time I presented to the board about what the graduating class was going to be, and it is the class of 2020, current grade 7. So, more on proficiency-based learning, systems of instruction and assessment, and grading that are based on students demonstrating mastery of knowledge. So there are going to be some great opportunities for me to reference the real-world design folks that you saw up here, as well as the UVM. It was like totally fortuitous that they were here talking about this business simulation that they did, because in a little while I'm going to talk about this demonstration of mastery and what it's going to look like for South Burlington High School students. This has always been part of my slide. I've now made it red and underlined it, and it's that proficiency-based learning does not presume that grading as a measure of achievement is obsolete or being phased out. And I think that that's important, but I think it's important to keep in mind that you could Google proficiency-based learning, and you will find a model of proficiency-based learning that talks about the indication of proficiency supplanting the measurement of learning by way of, or the measurement of achievement by way of grades. And some schools may want to do that. But you can create a proficiency-based model and still continue to measure student achievement by assigning them grades. And so I want to just say that. I'm kind of saying it again and again, and I want to make sure that folks know. And it's particularly true at the pre-K through 5, pre-K through 8 level. As systems move towards a proficiency-based model or towards a standards-based or an outcome-based model, they may move away from grades more readily than a 9 through 12 school would move away from grades. So I just want to take care to make sure I mention that. One thing that is conceivable is that a D- might not be an indicator of proficiency. And so currently, D- will get you graduation credit just like an A+ will. And that is, oh, did that just?
Yeah,
you touched the screen.
Smartboard's working.
Really smart.
Go back, arrow back on the
No,
screen.
I'm good. I was talking too much on that screen anyway. So, again, old Carnegie units, new proficiency, graduation policy must define proficiency. Wow, that's cool.
It's on, Patrick.
Again, some more information about what proficiency-based graduation requirements are. I'm going to get a little bit more specific in a little while, so I think that it will become a little bit more clear. So what does this mean for SBHS? So the good news here, and actually, Elizabeth, I think that it's fortuitous that we have ENDS policies. I mean, I don't know if we were really imagining that this is going to help us because this is the wave of the future, but it's definitely helping us. It's also definitely helping us that we had our civic and social expectations, which have existed for over 10 years, our academic expectations, both those working together. Our mapped curriculum is a tremendous assist. Joanne Canning started us down mapping curriculum, gosh, 7-8 years ago. There's no way she saw coming what we're dealing with now, but there's no question that having our curriculum mapped has really helped us as we start to align with a proficiency-based model. Our college and career readiness standards, which are your Common Core state standards or your next gen science standards, which we've adopted, are helpful. And our TLC professional development model is also helpful, and it's also helpful to us, where we're fortunate to have that model. And I may talk about that a little bit more later. It is, if you're ever interested, wow, oh, didn't work. That was actually a link. But if you ever are interested in in what we're offering for TLC, and as you know, today was a TLC day, and TLC days, teachers come in a little early, students come in a little late, students come in about an hour late, and of course that's not going to work. We have and we have these mini workshops that go on, and they are all, for the most part, aligned with one of these initiatives. I'm in a performance assessment workshop right now that is really, really helping the teachers that are in the workshop, and it's helping me as well. I'm just going to keep going. Now I've ruined it. There we go. Oh, gosh. Great. Stuart, can I blame you?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Hang on. It's because I hit that darn link. I guess I won't do links anymore.
Try to skip again, Tom.
I need the real world design kits back. I'm going to close the program and reopen it. Sorry folks, talk amongst yourselves. Oh, come on. There we go.
It smacks a little this thing of, I'm dating myself, but you and I were born the same year, so basic competencies. Do you remember that?
I do, but I'm going to tell you how it's different.
Okay.
I mean, I wasn't a Vermonter at the time, so I don't remember it like perhaps you do. And, you know, both of us having been born in 1974.
Right.
When I show you some of where this is going, I think you'll start to see how it's different from basic competencies. But that's not something that I haven't heard before. So, this is the high school's kind of work plan. So this is how we're going to get to this proficiency-based graduation. And again, you know, this is an important date for us to pay attention to, and we are very clearly working backward from that date. So I've got this divided into phases. When I first became a school administrator, I used to take things and say year 1, year 2, year 3, and I learned really fast that was a bad idea, because sometimes what all of a sudden you're in year 1 and you're finished, and you're like, wow, that was really fast. And then you start year 2. Some people are like, no, that's year 2. We're done with year 1. Or sometimes you're like year 1 and then you get into the work and you're like, holy smokes, there's no way we're going to do this in 1 year. So phases are my preferred term. So phase 1 used to include all these things. Now there's phase 1A, which is, as Stuart mentioned, the Agency of Education has released a draft of proficiency-based graduation requirements for schools to reject, modify, or accept. And so within all of our content areas, we have been knee-deep in that work right now. Looking at the quality of the PBGRs as released by the agency, seeing how they align with the Common Core, Next Gen Science Standards, et cetera. So, and I will tell you that within our departments, we are experiencing all 3 of those bullets.
And one of the reasons for this is separate committees in the state did each one based on the content, and they didn't do any alignment work then to see, oh, the way the science people approach this, is that how the social studies people approached it? So we're doing that work, really.
Yeah.
They
Yes.
basically cut and pasted.
That's correct. And they definitely don't work together. But it's fine, and that's been exciting work. And then phase 2, we are going to need to assign our content graduation requirements to courses that we have right now. So currently students move through South Burlington High School by taking a series of courses that get them credit towards graduation. The courses are often not always articulated into each other. For the majority of our students, at the beginning of this shift towards proficiency-based graduation requirements, they are going to look to us to say, what courses do I take to show that I'm proficient so that I can graduate? And so we need to make sure that the model that we come out with is very easily understood by that constituency. You know, 8th graders when they're signing up for their freshman year, and their parents, so that we can be able to say to them, this is how your kid is going to get to graduation. And so what we're going to look to do is to assign content proficiencies to courses within the program. Now, we don't expect, generally, I'm speaking in very general terms, we don't expect generally right now that 9th and 10th grade students are operating at the graduation proficiency level. So we may assign graduation requirements to the 9th and 10th grade courses at what are pre-graduation standards. And then our 11th and 12th grade courses would be at the graduation standards. And then we have some courses that are open to all students of all grade levels, and they would have a hybrid of pre-grad and grad standards. So how do we do this? And this is the part that I think is most exciting about this. And that's we have to determine, once we determine the courses where the transferable skills and the ends are, and the graduation requirements are going to be assessed, then we need to develop assessments within those courses. And this is the first time you're going to see the word RATS. Right. And so RATS stands for Rebel Assessment Tasks. Okay? And phase 2 are going to be the development and piloting of rubrics and RAT assessments, and publishing and documenting the planned RAT assessments. So this becomes part of our published curriculum, which is what Atlas is. That's where we publish our curriculum. So these rubrics and the places where the proficiencies are assessed becomes public information so that everybody knows, and the development of the RAT assessments and the assignment of those to courses. And then phase 3 is where we're going to adjust course offerings to make sure, and programs to assure that all students meet graduation requirements. And if we could, if you want to imagine when this could potentially become really, really personalized, hyper-personalized for kids, it's through this adjustment course offering and programming to make sure that all students can meet graduation requirements. And so concurrently, so everything that was happening that I just showed you is department level, directed by teacher leadership with support from administration. Now, this is administration's responsibility with support from the CAS, and that's communicating with parents, students, and the community, working with our sending schools, pre-K through 5, Tuttle Middle School, and our non-resident tuition student sending schools. And this is, to Elizabeth's point, aligning graduation with requirements with ENDS policy, which is the preferred mode, or work towards alignment of ENDS policy with graduation requirements. So there is that kind of out clause where, you know, gee, if we really want this to be a graduation requirement and it's not showing up anywhere in ENDS, there's a disconnect. In red there is facilitating the South Burlington School Board's adoption of the proficiency-based graduation requirements by statute. This board is the only board that can modify our graduation requirements. We have to systematize the tracking and attainment of proficiency-based graduation requirements. We have to assure, and this gets into the PLPs, we have to assure that PLPs and student exhibitions serve and support the tracking of PBGR attainment, and also serve to personalize the student's high school experience. And then we have to provide, this is on me with my CAS, provide and coordinate job-embedded, just-in-time professional development for folks. So, wait, what? By when? Here's the timeline kind of recap. And so this SB20, that's an important graduating class. So we're going to kind of follow them along the top of the timeline. And then here are the phases, which I just talked about, along the bottom of the timeline. And so you'll see phase 1A and 1B, which is the development of our proficiencies and the linking of those proficiencies to courses. We really have until January 2016 to do that, because that's when those 9th graders are going to start signing up for classes. We actually have till the fall of that year because we have to publish our program of studies.
When does the board have to adopt?
Sometime between now and right there.
Okay.
Because SB20 registers, enters, and engages in the 9-10 program right here. And once we need to really be able to say to those students, you know, this is the path. These are the graduation requirements. It's why we can't really, it wouldn't really be right to say to the current 8th graders, oh, you're graduating based on proficiency also. Because unless we were ready to do it right now. Or the current juniors, oh, just kidding about all those credits you've been counting and assigning. Now you're going to graduate based on proficiency. So we can't change the rules of the game in the middle. So that's why we have to take good care to, and we're going to be running a dual system for a little while. Some students, current 8th graders, are going to be graduating based on the accumulation of credits, and their peers are going to be graduating, or their
current 7th graders.
Their current 7th graders are going to be graduating based on proficiency. So, you know, we're going to be having fun with that. And it's of note that phase 3 goes on forever. And phase 3 is that modification of the program, increased personalization, etc. And just for fun, because remember that the PLPs were part of Act 77, and EQS is a separate mandate than Act 77. They stuck PLPs in for the 8th graders. And if you really were going to align these high leverage policy changes, you would say, well, make the PLPs start with the students who are graduating based on proficiencies. But no, we're going to start PLPs for kids a year early because we have to. But the reality is these PLPs will probably be different than these PLPs because the students are going to be, you know, moving towards graduation through different modalities. So, slow down. What's a proficiency? If I had the courage to click on that link, it would take us to the state's released graduation proficiencies. And what I'll do is I'll send the board the link to that page if you haven't been there yet. It's on the Agency of Education website. It shows all the different areas that we need to have graduation requirements in, and then it shows some sample proficiencies. But what I wanted to show you actually is is a South Burlington draft. So here is, and you'll see, this looks a little bit like what Stuart put up earlier because it follows the same model of the state's published proficiencies. So you've got your graduation proficiency in your left-hand column, you've got your performance indicators, and then here, this is a South Burlington specific pathways and required experiences. So that's the how, out of the gate, that our students will meet a proficiency. So, for example, this is a reading literature proficiency that is specific to English language arts. So the English language arts teachers did a fair amount of work this fall, starting in August. They're looking at consideration of what their proficiency should be. They've come to some level of agreement that we should need to have a proficiency connected to reading literature, comprehend, interpret, analyze, and evaluate literary print texts. Okay? You'll see here that that's the South Burlington ENDS policy reference, parenthetically on the graduation proficiencies. Performance indicators have parenthetical references to either Common Core state standards or, in the case of science, they would be references to next generation science standards. So that's what the numbers at the end of the performance indicators and graduation proficiencies mean. But the right-hand column is where it starts to explain the how we do this. So there's two ways. There are courses that are going to have the proficiency introduced. There's going to be instruction on it, practice, and pre-graduation assessments in grades 9 and 10. Our grade 9 and 10 English program is predominantly humanities and American studies. This is just a draft, so this is for discussion purposes. And so those students would be introduced and assessed at a pre-graduation level on this performance indicator. There are also some required experiences and exhibitions for all freshmen and sophomores that relate to this proficiency. The Gates McGinnity is a diagnostic assessment that all ninth graders take. There's freshman PLP development and review, sophomore exhibition, plan assessment, or whatever replaces the plan. The AccuPlacer is a post-secondary readiness assessment that's given to students typically at the who are matriculating to the community college level. It's been suggested that that might be a nice indicator for us for our sophomores. Now, grades 11 and 12, this is where we're going to have to focus on instruction, practice, and assessment and demonstration of graduation level performance. And so if you look, what we have here is really a list of our current program in English language arts. And you'll see here, it talks about how there are going to be RATs, or these assessment tasks, at mid-year and final. And so, the assessment tasks at mid-year and final here are going to have to point to this proficiency. These courses here that are in yellow, they're in yellow because they currently don't. They currently don't specifically address the reading of literature in those courses. So that's public speaking, advanced comp, writing workshop, advanced comp 2, writing memoirs. So the reading of literature is not introduced, practiced, or assessed in those classes currently. So if we're going to say that students can progress towards this proficiency in those courses, then we need to change the courses, or we need to take them off the list. So I'll show you one more example of proficiency in English language arts as well as a pathway. Here's demonstrating command and conventions of standard English grammar and usage when writing or speaking. There's your reference to the ENDS policy. And here's your right-hand column in terms of pathways and required experiences. Not going to go through it all again, but pretty similar, with the exception of the fact that you'll see here now these are no longer highlighted because that proficiency is readily addressed within those courses currently. And here you have your required experiences or exhibitions that align with this proficiency. So I want to talk a little bit about RATs. I'm sorry, but I think that you'll be interested. Because if you just looked at that, what I just showed you, where the courses are aligned with, you can kind of sit there and say, so what's different? So what's different? So instead of being credits, you're calling them proficiencies, but they're still attached to courses, and it just kind of feels like window dressing on the same thing that you've been doing for a while. And so what's really different are these assessment tasks that we're in the process of developing. And there are a number of assessment tasks that we currently use, and I think I feel it's safe to say that these assessment tasks are when we are at our best. And the assessment tasks get at proficiency better than some of our other assessments. And you'll be able to start to see the difference between what a RAT assessment is, or a performance assessment, and kind of an old school knowledge recall based assessment. So performance assessments allow students to construct, perform an original response rather than just recognizing the potentially right answer out of a list provided. So flash to real world design kids, flash to those students who did a business simulation. That was not, tell us what genre this painting is, Cubist, Impressionist, not even close. So it was, so that's where our assessment tests of proficiencies are going to be pretty significant. So these worthwhile assessments, here are some characteristics of these assessments, and you'll see often a real world scenario, like finding some kind of boring insect in a field with a drone. Authentic and complex process, so multiple possible answers, solutions are not given. Higher order thinking, authentic performance, such as a memo, presentation, or another write-up. Transparent evaluation criteria, and student engagement. Some element of choice and decision making. So here are some examples of some performance assessments that these are fairly simple performance assessments. And so here's a scenario where the student is given a scenario, they're given a series of documents, and they're given a task. And the ultimate task is, Senator Dulce wants to make sure he votes appropriately on the aspartame bill. So he's asked you to analyze the strengths and or limitations of each of Sauer's 2 main points. So there's just this kind of conflicting scenario, and then you're going to get these documents, these private investigator documents, local newspaper articles, etc. And the students are going to have to use these documents to perform that task. Over here, this is another example of a performance assessment. There's a rough draft where the student is saying why there should be a longer school day. Then you get a little bit of data in terms of the school day, and then you have to revise the student's paragraph by adding details from the daily schedule that helps support the reason for having a longer school day. So complex tasks, really multiple answers are possible, so no one way to get to the solution, and involving often conflicting information, etc. These are fairly simple examples. A lot of our students in English Language Arts and Social Studies do what are called DBQs, which are document-based questions. And it's a very similar model where they'll have a series of documents, and then sometimes they're conflicting documents. Often they're different modalities, maybe a video, 2 articles, and a map. They've got to take all of those and synthesize them into the answer often in a real world scenario. So here's where we're going. Does anybody have any questions about RATs? Because they are.
What's the result of failure? I mean.
So you don't pass a RAT, you mean?
Yeah, I mean.
Yeah, there's a couple of academic policy questions that we're going to have to answer, and one of them is, can you pass a RAT and fail a class that the RAT is affiliated with, or can you fail the class and pass the RAT, and what happens then, in terms of your progression through the model. And those are discussions that are alive and well in the schoolhouse. They're academic policy discussions that we have to decide. And then what do you do with the student who doesn't show that they're proficient, say, in line with where you'd like to see them do it. So you want to see, or including, and how many times do you have to show you're proficient before we say you're proficient? Is it a one-time thing, or do you have to do it, repeatedly over time, or in multiple contexts? I mean, those are the kinds of discussions that we've got to figure out on an academic policy level, and also on a capacity level, and on a, how are we going to track all this information level. But so if a student doesn't pass a RAT, I think the answer is it depends. Where are they in the system? If they're a junior, then we've got to get them there before they graduate. If they're a second semester senior, that's a problem, because they're not showing to be graduation ready. They've never shown themselves to be proficient in writing, and so what we're not going to do is have them take a reading class and call it English and say you're done. So that's another kind of big difference between current system and the new system. Is in the current system, it's like, I really don't like to read, so for my junior and senior year, I'm going to take public speaking, advanced comp 2, writing memoirs, and all of a sudden it's like I'm just moving through my junior and senior year and I'm not taking any reading classes because I don't like to, or maybe I'm not really proficient at reading, and then am I really college ready or career ready when I get to the point that now I need to do some complex reading, and I just kind of found my way through the system to avoid that. And so so there are more guarantees that we're going to have to work with students to get them proficient in every area that we say we're going to. Yes?
This is a lot. And who is going to help that student that can't keep track of all of this on their own? There will be the students who will be like, got my RATs, got this, got that. They'll be all over it. They'll be tracking what proficiencies they've met. And there will be some students that could potentially be lost in all of this. Who will help that student navigate through all of this?
Yeah, so right now we have this dual system where we have courses, grades, and report cards, and then we have credits. And so right now, students plan their academic program, and they know that if they pass class, they get the credit. And you can go into guidance at any time, and you can say, print me out a credit report for Jane Doe. I want to see where she is relative to graduation. And the guidance counselor can get in their computer and print out a credit report that shows, here's Jane Doe. It's not a report card. It doesn't show that she got an A or a B. It just shows she's got 3.5 credits of English. She's got 2.5 credits of math or whatever. So I can look at one of those, and I can tell you exactly what a kid needs to graduate based on looking at that right now. And so what we have to do is we have to create an analogous product that prints out the proficiencies, that shows kids and families, this is where you are. So when you go in to sign up for your junior classes, or when you go in to sign up for your senior classes, right now a student's going to sit there and say, well, I still need 2 years of math. So I'm going to sign up for 2 years of math, or I'm going to sign up for math this year. In the future, they'll say, well, I still need to show that I'm proficient in those 3 areas. What are the courses that are going to allow me to show that I'm proficient in those areas? Okay, that's the menu from which I'm going to choose when I am picking my courses. So it's a really good question, because it raises the blood pressure of a lot of folks, including my guidance folks, where they're like, how are we going to do this? What we really can't do is put that 100% on the kid. The system capacity has to exist for us to help the students navigate through their program, especially as we initially go through this shift.
The other piece of that, Diane, is the personal learning plan process. Part of the reason that these dovetail is that starting in at least 7th grade, but probably eventually with the transition from 5th grade to middle school at least, students will start to be developing personal learning plans where they'll be looking at keeping track of, and we'll have a system to help, and parents are involved in that. That's part of what we have to develop as well, because part of this is building independence for kids. Part of the idea of being proficient, especially when you look at the transferable skills, is I'm self-directed. So it's true right now, a lot of our kids are not self-directed. We've held their hand through the system. We have to develop a system, which our ends also says the same thing, in which kids take independence. And I think that's really, part of this model. The other thing is, Pat's really talking about, as we shift the ball, remember there's the whole flexible pathways position as well. We're gonna be looking at internships that, are not necessarily developed now. Luckily, we have the CDC, years of some internship work, so that, that's one direction. And, the state it's not about seat time. So theoretically, some kids could get out early, and some kids would get out late. And trying to build a culture where that's a norm, that's an interesting piece, because obviously, if you don't graduate in 4 years, that's got its own thing, whereas the way the educational quality standards work, that would be fine, if I needed 5th year.
Right. I mean, there's stigma attached to graduating early and late right now. I mean, and so I think out of the gate, we need to create a system that closely aligns with what we currently do, so that people can understand it. And so, I don't think we're going to have this, like, all of a sudden, this massive number of students who are saying, I'm proficient, I'm out of here. You know what I mean? Nor are we going to have a massive number of students who we're saying to them, oh no, brakes are on, you're not proficient, you're staying here. You know what I mean? So that's one of the reasons it's really important that we start with the grade 9, so that we know the students who need, additional support, or who need an opportunity to show that they're proficient in a different way. And if we, start with those 9th graders, then we can start looking at, and what I haven't really showed you is the kind of pliability that graduating based on proficiencies is going to create within our system. So for example, a proficiency around communication. Currently, really, if you told me we're going to stick with Carnegie units, I would say, all right, your Carnegie units, communication, English. That's part of 4 years of English. Going forward, a visual and performing arts teacher could really easily latch on to a proficiency that is English language arts, and come up with an assessment task that's vetted by, let's say, English language arts and or industry, that says, yeah, those are the communication skills that students need to have to be successful after high school. So we can say, all of a sudden, we have a student getting English credit in chorus, because that's how they're going to be able to meet that proficiency. That kind of variation is not going to come out in the first iteration of our proficiencies, but it's those kinds of things are going to start to happen.
So, and my other question is, what kind of concurrent communication plan for parents and families do you envision? Because this is a big shift.
It is, and I don't want to be as confusing. This is the 4th time you've seen some version of this presentation, you know what I mean? And so I want to get far enough down the road that I can be more clear than I've been today in terms of the path and what this is exactly going to look like. But I don't want to be too far away from, that enrollment of those 8th graders. So I think we'll have to start really ramping up the communication with the class of 2020, their parents, towards this spring, certainly over the summer. And I, as I said before, I really want to make sure that we're presenting it in ways. I mean, I present this to the teaching faculty, and when I talk this long, they start glazing over, and because and they're in the business. So I think we have to do a really good job to make sure that we're presenting this in a way that students and parents can latch on to.
And also, Diane, that grant that I talked about that we're participating in, so that's a series from December to June of 2 workshop days a month, and some mentoring in between virtually, and part of that, 2 of those days are about parent communication. So we'll be building a plan. That's one of the reasons why we decided, this is doing our work, at the same time with the Great Schools Partnership, which has been doing a lot of this work. Pat and his staff has actually already been doing some work. The people we went and did some stuff in Mystic with when we were pursuing the Gates grant that we decided not to go forward with. We're actually getting the benefit of that in a different way because the state took it up. And that way more people could participate. So we'll be keeping you informed as that goes along, because that's part of the process. Because again, this is a process that you're going to have to be very much involved in, because eventually, whatever the proficiency-based graduation is, just like now, that's the board's responsibility to say, this is what a South Burlington graduate needs to do, both in content and what those indicators would be of transferable skills. And how we communicate that to the community is part of the entire package.
I love this quote from this workshop or initiative, imperative, that Elizabeth and I have been at for 2 days. But it's if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, to go together. And this is definitely where we're at in terms of community involvement, teacher involvement, student involvement, which was something that was a big takeaway for me in terms of, one student said something at the conference the other day, which I thought was pretty thoughtful, which was like, sometimes these changes happen and we say, wait, why are you doing that? It was fine before. And I think that that happens to me a lot at our school, where students they're actually a pretty conservative bunch, and that happens, I think, in institutions where the students are pretty happy, and they're kind of like, well, why are we changing anything? What's wrong with how this is going? So part of the communication plan really needs to make sure that we're including students wherever we can, so that when they do see things start to change, when they do see the assessments in their classes start to change. I mean, the benefit of that kind of assessment is that when you talk to students, they'll tell you that that's meaningful assessment. I actually enjoy it. I feel like I'm learning while I'm doing it, as opposed to like, what'd you do in school today? Did you learn anything? No, I took 3 tests. If we can shift our assessment culture, the difference between, learning and assessment will become much more narrow, or that gap between learning and assessing will become much more narrow. So this high leverage policy only really goes so far, and what we've got in our school right now is this kind of top down. We're changing our graduation requirements. Bottom up, teachers are looking at their assessment practices, that we're looking at proficiencies and where they fit into our courses and our programs. So it really is this top down, bottom up initiative that's happening in both ways. We're learning along the way. These are ways that you can help us, can kind of learn with us, because we have a lot to learn about. I think encouraging communication and mind for misconceptions, I think that would be really helpful. So, you're going to get the over the cucumbers, hey, I hear they're not having grades at the high school anymore because they're doing this proficiency-based thing. Like, so you can either say, oh no, that's not happening. Pat came to the board and talked about it, and you can go watch it on RETN. Or you could tell that person, you should call, set up a meeting with Pat. He'll kind of talk too much and go over how we're going to get to where we're going. But if you could help us, because different communities are going to do this different ways, but yet we're all responding to the same high leverage policy and legislation. So people are going to hear from their friends on the soccer team whose kids go to a different school that maybe is like ours, but wears red and black, and those kids are going to say, they may be doing it totally different than we are, and that parent's going to say, do you know what's going on? The state's making us do it, and so it's going to be happening in South Burlington too. And so if you could help me work with folks in terms of misconceptions. This originally at a school board meeting a few weeks ago, I was going to come in and talk to you about some increased local professional development for our folks. The board meeting kind of took a different turn, and I didn't really bring it up. But at some point, I'm going to come back, and I want to talk to you some more about our local professional development, because we have a really, really high-functioning model right now at the high school. I can't tell you how great it is. And I don't know how we would be doing half the work we're doing without it. And I need to talk to you about how we can support this initiative by pushing that program out just a little bit. And you can invite me back, but just not that often. I mean, I love it, but it's 9:45.
The board has been ends overdrive. But thank you, Patrick, very much.
Yes, thank you. So when you're on your way home, when you think of the question that you didn't ask, just shoot me an email. I'd be happy.
Thank you, Pat.
And Mr. Burke, as usual, you're about to use.
Yeah, I can leave a little something everywhere I go, you know.
Okay, let's move on. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Stuart. We'll move on to agenda item 10. A little switch of topic, the
So we're gonna move
landfill
on.
solar project.
Yes, and we do have Chad here with us in the audience, who's been patiently waiting. This is the solar landfill project, or the net metering project, and there is no action on here, which I don't know if we mentioned that or not, but I don't think we're prepared to do the action. Is that correct, John?
Well, we'll talk about it. There is a possible action.
Okay, because I knew we had some pieces that was maybe not available, so maybe that's there then. So, this has been, this isn't the first time you've heard about it. Net metering project, solar project with the city-owned land on the, city-owned property, which is actually the landfill. About 7 acres or so. 7 acres would be populated with solar arrays. We would obviously benefit with credits, electrical credits. And so I'm very much in favor. Kevin and myself, along with our respective staff, have worked through this. Chad's here to talk to you a little bit more, a little specifically about the net metering solar project. So welcome, Chad.
Great. Thank you very much, David, and thank you, members of the board. I don't know if you recall, but I was here, I believe it was June. We did talk through the mechanics of the project and how it would work as far as cost savings go on the school district's electric bills. There was a letter of intent that was executed. It was non-binding, obviously, but that letter of intent was executed. Fast forward to November, and we are ready to, put the net metering, the actual legal agreement, in front of you all for consideration and execution. This would be the binding contract that dictates how the district would pay for the net metering credits that are generated. At a high level, we look at these projects as a hedge for the district's electrical costs. So essentially, what would happen would be the array would produce solar electricity that gets dumped right into Green Mountain Power's grid. And then Green Mountain Power, members of the group net metering arrangement, are credited on their electric bills. So for example, and the deal that's been contemplated with the city would be the city taking 60% of those net metering credits and the district taking the balance of the 40% remaining net metering credits. So for the district's perspective, this would mean, say, the high school, maybe the junior high school, and maybe one of the elementary schools to consume all of those net metering credits. The net metering credits would be would show up on the electric meters for those schools at a value of 19 cents per kilowatt hour to start, and the district would turn around and pay 17 cents for those credits. So the reason that the value of the net metering credits are higher than your actual blended rate of electricity, if you've calculated all the kilowatt hours that you consumed, if you divided the total cost by the total number of kilowatt hours that you consumed, is about probably 12 to 13 cents. The value of the net metering credits include what's called a solar adder, which is the state of Vermont's incentive for, and Green Mountain Power's incentive for having customer-owned generation within their network. It's a benefit to the utility, it's a benefit to ratepayers. Solar power addresses peak exposure to the utility. So the utility actually went forth first and created the solar adder. Legislature has now mandated that all utilities offer the solar adder, so that's legislatively set. So in year one, you're paying 17 cents for something that's worth 19 cents. As the rate of electricity changes over time, you still pay 17 cents for the first 10 years, and then in the out 10 years of the contract, you'll pay 14.5 cents. The reason for that drop is after 10 years, we lose that solar adder. The solar adder will start at around 4 cents, 4.3 cents with a 14.7 cent retail rate underneath it. And that 4.3 cents will be fixed for 10 years. As the rate of the underlying residential retail rate, which is what all net metering projects are credited at, as that rate changes, the 4.3 cents stays the same. So generally, people believe that the rates of electricity will continue to escalate over time as they have historically. The Department of Public Service has put forth projections in and around a 3% per year annual average rate of increase. So as that 14.7 cents becomes, say, 15 or 15.7 cents, the value of those net metering credits to the district will increase from 19 cents to 20, 21, 22, 23, so on and so forth, until we lose that solar adder at year 10. And then the value of the net metering credits will just be the underlying retail rate of electricity. So obviously the risk is, what is that value of the escalating rate? Is it 1% over 20 years? Is it 2%, 3%, 4%? That's going to dictate the ultimate savings to the city. The reason we did the 17-cent rate to the 14.5-cent rate was to provide some protection to the city. So basically, the only way you would be underwater would be, and paying, say, 17 cents for net metering credits that are worth less than 17 cents, would be that rates would decrease by greater than 10%. We don't see that as much of a risk, nor do other communities that we've worked with. And then subsequently in the out 10 years, when we lose the solar adder, you would be paying for those net metering credits at the current value of electricity 10 years prior. So we feel as if that's a pretty good deal as well. So essentially, you know, this net metering agreement would be executed. Encore would take all the risk in developing the project, capitalize the development effort, capitalize the project construction effort, take all the risk on all of the project-related activities. We are looking to the city and the school district as financeable off-takers for those net metering credits, and hopefully showing a decent value to both customers in the process. Again, getting back to the hedge concept, we see this as an opportunity to A, save money, and B, lock in a good chunk of your electrical consumption costs at a fixed rate that, you know, when you do your budgets every year, you don't have to make assumptions for, you know, 3, 4, 5 years down the road. What are our electric costs going to be? You can take this chunk of production, this chunk of your consumption, and essentially fix that for 20 years at these two different rates. The concept of the hedge is further illustrated by the fact that this is not 100% of your electric demand. It's somewhere between 30 and, say, at most 50% based on the final project size. So say electric rates go down. And again, they'd have to go down by more than 10% for you to be exposed. But say they do go down. Okay, so you know, the cost of the value to this solar project isn't as great as it once was, but that's not a bad thing because the rest of your electric costs have gone down as well. So that's why we find a lot of communities and a lot of school districts jumping on board with this concept, because it's a way to essentially levelize your cost of electricity at a fairly low risk.
So Chad, would you say, I mean, just giving the board some additional information, I mean, based on obviously the assumptions that you've made, you know, the benefit to the district or the credit or the reduction, I mean, it starts out kind of in year one in that $22,000 range?
Yeah, let's call it $20,000.
Yeah,
I think when we first did the LOI, we were projecting about $18,000 worth of savings. Since then, we've done some additional design. We have a slightly bigger project. So until we know what the exact final size of that project at the landfill will hold.
So in general, it would be, at the 2015, would be a savings of around, again, assuming the current usage, 20,000. up to 2024 would be around 50 some odd thousand.
Yep, and that's assuming, I think, which
Yeah.
generally, we've been assuming for the purposes of this discussion, a 2.5% annual rate of escalation. Again, history is somewhere between 3 and 4%. Department of Public Service is projecting a little over 3% average annual rate increase over 20 years. So we've been a little bit more conservative than that at 2.5%. Those are the numbers that you see in the table.
So I'm just trying to, from a budgetary perspective, obviously, one is the project and, the interest in continuing by the board, and then cost avoidance or cost savings as a result of the project. So it would, I'm just trying to generalize, in general, for the life of the graph here, certainly a $20,000 difference, avoidance would be ongoing, at least the way I kind of see that. Is that?
In year one, and again, that should
Changes.
escalate with an increased electric rate. We think it's about $1 million over 20 years of savings to the district at 40% of the production, with the city taking the other 60%.
I looked at we've been in contact with Chad a number of times since June when we had to frequently ask questions. And it seems like the questions we had then, you've answered and have come to pass. One thing we did was got a legal look, a legal opinion on the agreement, and that proved fine. Robert Fletcher did that. We also note that the agreement is with the South Burlington City, and that we are offered these credits. And I would say, and you can correct me, but Encore has the risk. You deal with the Public Service Department. David's not going to have to trudge up there.
No.
At all.
No, not at all.
Yeah. And the reason it was a little bit unclear with action tonight is because you'd indicated to me Friday that the city is going to act on this December 1.
Correct.
So, so we were looking for the board to say, to give David the authority to enter into the contract, or to wait till our next meeting, December 3rd, and see what the city did. Because the city hasn't finalized that 60-40 split. We could get more.
I think if anything, you'll get a little bit more.
Yeah.
And you have plenty of capacity. Again, you'll be less than 50% of your total electric cost.
Right.
Could I propose, we have not had a meeting between David and I and Kevin Dorn or the new chairperson of the council in quite a while. And I know we're trying to schedule those. In addition, the board packet did not include any background information, so I don't think the board was knowledgeable about what we were going to be covering. So I think in the interest of getting with the city prior to then and understanding what the council will do on the 1st, it might be helpful, and then maybe finalizing the split too. It might be helpful to kind of get that meeting scheduled first.
See if we can do it maybe before the 3rd or the 1st, our meeting, or sometime.
Well, if we can meet first, but then put it on our December 3rd agenda, I think that may make the most sense.
Just to make sure you understand where the city is.
Yeah.
And Chad had information to us Thursday, but I was hesitant because the city is the primary, and we're along for the ride, so to speak.
Yeah.
And so I didn't send that out. That's what's happened.
Well, this is a good refresh, so I appreciate it.
Yeah, and there is a memo that does, it contemplates the district's benefits at that 40%.
Okay.
And there's some tables and some graphs that sort of, communicate the value proposition at that.
Yeah, and we probably
percentage.
want to include the ROI assessment in the next board packet then.
Sure.
If we could do that.
Yep.
Well, thank you, Chad. I'm sorry you had to wait. We're way out of whack on our schedule today.
Yeah, no, it's okay. I understand. You guys are doing some good work.
But we're glad you're here. And I do think it's a great project. I'm really happy. I know I expressed myself. Chad knows this. I expressed myself around, just my global concerns around putting solar array on school-owned property. We don't have a lot of it. Et cetera, et cetera. So, roofs possibly. But this is a wonderful opportunity on the landfill site. So we're excited about the opportunity, and we'll be in touch with you.
Okay, great.
One last thing, there's always been the talk of the deadline, so we need to decide December 3rd. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think so. So we are faced with some deadlines in terms of getting the project through the Public Service Board process in order to actually get it built and commissioned by this time next year. And I think it speaks to, a little bit of it speaks to this Georgetown Energy Prize that the city is pursuing, which is several $1 million. And so there is some motivation on behalf of the city to get going and to try to get the project through the permitting process, get it constructed in advance of those grant deadlines. And obviously with the holidays right around the corner, we would just like to, if we don't get things executed by, say, the 15th or that week, we lose like 3 weeks. 2.5 to 3 weeks.
Sure.
Great. Thank you, Chad.
Thank you all. Appreciate it. Thanks.
So maybe I can make a suggestion since we're at 10:03. I think it may be important for you to talk about the resolution tonight. Master planning and visioning, and there's no action. I'm still in pursuit of city, although we've had 2 current task force meetings, and it's going well. I've already told you 2.5 is off. You have the information on 2.2, but we can move that to either a retreat conversation that will follow here. So my recommendation would be to do 13 on the resolution, and then we set the agenda with kind of those recommendations.
Okay.
So before you decide, on the master planning, has the calendar been published?
Calendar right now, and you'll see it, the task force have met and they've confirmed kind of their task force meetings and then community meetings. So I need to push that back out with it, back out. They had a couple other, slight tweaks on the some of the dates, but the conversations, the information's going well right now. So I need to make sure you guys have the dates as well.
And do we have or can you email out the list of participants on that committee?
Sure.
I don't think we've seen that. Martin, David's kind of reviewed modifications to the agenda. We're going to push, we're taking master planning financial stewardship off this evening. We're going to consider moving 2.2 into our retreat date on the 1st. And I would even suggest the discussion on the resolution that I know there's a lot of interest in feedback. I think we can get that feedback, and then I might suggest that maybe Martin and I, as a subcommittee, work to further refine that. I know there was a lot of information that came out in the 2-day summit that could impact that resolution. So if maybe we can have a brief discussion on feedback from other board members on the resolution or the revised resolution that you saw. That would be helpful. So with that, we'll move to that agenda item and open it up for discussion on the proposed resolution.
I think and this is sort of as a follow-up to my comment last time too. I think, just to clarify, I wasn't trying to say that we should increase the draw from the education fund, but what I was saying was that several of these resolutions involve multiple steps, and so what I had referenced at the last meeting was that I'm sorry, the hour, I'm not articulating very well, but I had recommended focusing on the revenue side where we would focus on increasing transfer from the general fund to the education fund, and then recommending using the education fund for things that were approved by Brigham. Does that make sense? Okay.
And that was the article in the other paper.
Right, I think it said something about, like, increasing the draw from the education fund. And what I had said was that my recommendation was to focus on the revenue side, which involved the increase of transfer from the general fund to the education fund. And the funding, the funding use is approved by Brigham. I can't even
maybe since
complete a
Corey's in the audience, maybe if there's you can maybe connect with Diane you probably have that statement.
And I'll try to be able to complete a sentence when we talk, okay?
Thank you, Diane.
Other comments or observations?
So I didn't have the benefit of the last discussion, but one thing that stuck out to me is that the first proposal talks about considering to outlaw strikes and impositions, and then the third or fourth proposal talks about at imposition, give the authority to the board to make a multi-year.
Yeah, that's not necessarily consistent, but this is my intent, and I think our intent was to lay out some different proposals and some background. I don't think we're providing all of this as a resolution.
Okay, it just seems like they're contradictory.
Yeah, no, those in fact are. Okay. And I mean, if we're the thing is that we want to give some options as well. I think that is our, and I don't know what the board's preference is, but is our preference that we should have strikes outlawed and imposition outlawed but not have binding arbitration? Or is our preference that we should do some different things with collective bargaining, such as at impasse, one could impose more than 1 year, for instance, and that they're, so that's one thing. We need to kind of decide what do we want to push for, and we can talk further about that on December 1st. And the second is, even if we really want to push for one, we can leave the other on the table. We can suggest that if this doesn't come to pass, that strikes and imposition are outlawed, then you should do this. That legislatures, you should allow us to impose for more than 1 year for these following reasons.
I understand. Yeah.
So.
One of the things I think that came out of the summit too, and I think we articulated this in our last round of discussions, is striking a balance between kind of short-term relief and prioritizing longer-term changes that we believe will benefit the system. So it became pretty clear at the session, that there will be change. It's going to be a legislative priority this year. There's a lot of concern about the pace of some of the legislation that got pushed through and either that got passed or tabled or that didn't get discussed at all in the last legislative session. So I think one of the steps we may take when we discuss this, and I'm assuming it's going to be on the retreat agenda or the December 1st agenda, is an emphasis on the short-term relief and priorities over the longer term, but really, what is the message we want to send to our legislature this year that is most relevant to either things we would like to see happen or things we want to make sure do not happen in a short-term kind of quick fix fashion, because we know that the collateral damage from some of those things would be hard to recover from. So that may be a way to think about this as we refine our efforts to come up with a more succinct resolution. I think what Martin's done, and I know what with some of the changes I had, it's really just trying to serve as a placeholder for a lot of the ideas that have come out either through experience or through some of the things that we think will benefit the system down the road. I will tell you that there were probably a list, 3 times as long that came out of this summit conversation that might inform our meeting on the 1st as well. And that's why I think maybe narrowing this focus to the message to our legislators in this session of what we think will add value and perhaps the things we want to caution them from moving too quickly on. If that's helpful.
Mm-hmm. And I think somewhat of a tangent, not really. We should plan on trying to set up a meeting, if we haven't tried to do that already, with the legislators from South Burlington, and presumably we should invite senators as well, to provide them our input sometime after the 1st and after the 3rd, because on the 1st, we can talk about what we should have on the 1st, if we're just going to have this kind of expanded, or if I should formulate some resolutions that we would then act on the 3rd, and I can adjust given what happens on the 1st. But sometime after the meeting on the 3rd, we should set up, or my suggestion is that we set up that kind of a meeting. I know we have the legislative meetings with the city, but I would suggest that we have one just perhaps with, or we can invite the city, but the issues are going to be the education issue.
Is it just a procedural question? When we meet with our representatives, do we have to share our proposals or ideas or priorities with them in resolution format? I mean, do we have to adopt a resolution for everything that we think is a priority?
No, I think that the exercise was for us to come up with a unified board position on some of these things. Because we may have some different opinions. I know I put some things in here that I don't necessarily agree with, frankly. But I mean, it's for discussion, and it's to come up with the unified position of the board. And that's kind of, I've been thinking of it in the concept of a resolution to get to that point. It doesn't.
It's sort of a way to organize our collective.
Correct. So it's the board's position.
But in the past, you haven't had as much of a focus on a resolution. You've had, we've identified areas of concern, I think, and have shared that pretty broadly in some sort of prioritized way. And that has been messy in the past. We've been a little bit smarter we want to go, with city and school, not because the city didn't, allow us, but it was a time limit issue, and we didn't get to our issues. We've changed that. Right. I agree. We could have a more separate and invite, and perhaps they could do something similar, and we could be invited to their session and listen.
And I think as far as the resolution, part of it also came from the fact that the city passed a resolution.
That's right.
So I've been thinking of it as, well, what's the resolution that we would rather see in its place or instead of that? So.
Well, I think the resolution would have more force than just a list of ideas.
Right.
Right.
So I think at some point we ought to try to get down to a few things. And I like the idea of segregating near term from far term. I think one of the things I find, I would like to see the proposals gathered in a succinct, separate thing with the document supporting the background information for it, and then some sort of an analysis on each one of these proposals as to what in the education effort gets changed and improved, and in what way. I think some of these things relate to not changing how much the education costs are, but reallocating how it's funded.
Correct.
Okay, it doesn't change the cost. Others look at the possibility of what you could do to actually reduce the cost. Some of them fairly mechanical, reduce people. Some of them require a lot of creativity and probably more effort than we could engineer within this district by itself. Things like we've talked for several years about the possibility of having some substantial collaborative efforts between various areas. The closest thing in here that I read in this thing so far is the support for the idea of consolidating small things into bigger things. That may or may not reduce costs, but that general scheme ought to be able, scale ought to have some effect someplace, okay, that's beneficial to cost. It really ought to. The question is, how do you do that, and what are the barriers to doing that, and what are the things that changing that could have that happen? And some of these things are mechanical within the process itself, like things like, when we talk about things like how the fact-finding thing goes and that sort of thing. I mean, it's hard for me to understand how that affects property taxes, costs, any of that kind of. I understand the efficiency, I understand the frustration stuff associated with it, but it's sort of not a cost issue, not a dollar. So I think one of the things we ought to think about is, what's our main focus? Mm-hmm. Is it getting the cost redistributed? Is it finding a way to lower the cost? Is it finding a more efficient way to manage and govern the system? For what? Okay. Mm-hmm. And I think that if we could just list the proposals succinctly and try to categorize them against these things, that might help the process of how to deal with that.
Again, I took a look at it, and I know you're just out there. I mean, one of the things right in the beginning, the goal remains. Your purpose and goal. Obviously, you named two specific things: the cost and how to pay for it. And I think there's a from my perspective, a little bit of a missing link around and under what delivery system. The delivery system, I think, is an important piece around the primary goal, right? To Dan's point, the goal here is certainly making sure that it's affordable, but under what kind of delivery system is it that we want to provide?
Yeah, and there's kind of a practical reality of, we can adopt a resolution within South Burlington that isn't going to play within the state. Mm-hmm. So in terms of our legislators supporting it, I mean, you'd hope they would support it at the local level, but sitting through this summit, the guardrails, for instance, on the discussion of small schools, and there are schools that I was sitting at tables with of 36 students, mm-hmm. and there are some schools making efforts to consolidate, but they've taken 10 years. So one guardrail was continue to encourage small schools consolidation with incentives as it currently exists, and you kind of tolerate the glacial movement associated with that. Another guardrail would be charge the Agency of Education with engaging communities in proposing districts, larger districts, like 12 districts, possibly even associated with marrying up the districts associated with the Department of Human Services and the Department of Education, because there's clearly become some overlap in the services that are being delivered when you look at children from infant on, poverty level, and the educational system. So it was a pretty robust discussion about children's needs at the heart of this. And those might be some things that represent where we might want to take a stronger position, because, I know I looked at the proposal on sort of eliminate small school grants, and that, I have to say, that's really easy to say as South Burlington, and it doesn't help any of those individuals address their delivery system. It sort of just, cuts the flow of funding off in a more abrupt way. But I do think there were some more actionable resolutions that maybe, Martin, if you and I work together to kind of come up with something for the December 1st meeting that might be more meaningful to deliver to our legislators, that they can, act to on our behalf.
And I guess as far as delivery system and how we're doing this, the presentation from Patrick kind of shows us how we're doing this over the next 4 or 5 years, and it sounded very positive to me. My concern and what is driving most of what at least I've contributed to this is continuing to be able to go on that path and continue with the community support. And this is all about, I think, the feedback we've been getting, our nearly voted down budget.
Yeah.
It's about getting community support, and that is, for one, it is in fact shifting some of the tax burden, shifting the money out of the property tax, because that's the only tax that the community directly gets to vote on. And we're putting stuff in there that we have no control over, that the community doesn't know is there. There's no transparency to how much the community high school of Vermont is costing, or health care for retirees, or these other things. So it's to really try to make what we're asking the community to pay, as transparent as possible, and that it's what they should be paying for in their property taxes. So that's definitely one of it. But it is also trying to show the community, and in fact, hopefully have results of lowering the costs through statewide initiatives of consolidation and where it's necessary. Shifting the balance at the bargaining table, which I think would give boards a better ability to control the continuing increase in salaries that is not matched by the rest of the state. So in the event, that's kind of my overriding
Yeah, and the discussion,
interest.
this discussion came up, and the practical reality is 80% of schools' budgets are tied to personnel and benefits. So without reducing staff, and you don't really get there. So in addition to, from a process standpoint, to deliver some of the programs that Patrick's talking about in terms of the delivery system, you need to have the flexibility to provide professional development kind of as needed, and develop performance expectations associated with a new and emerging delivery system. And to the extent that current infrastructure becomes an obstacle to being able to deliver the education system as it's being redefined, that is something that we will need to think about. And whether it comes in the form of a resolution or just identification of obstacles. I know several students made an interesting comment that we have a tendency to define community as our South Burlington community, so it has some geographic and voter barriers to it, but students do not define their communities the way that the adults in the community do. So it was that I thought was an interesting conversation, and one that I think might benefit us as we go forward as well.
I think on like your page 4 on the document where you talk about opportunities, I think that's for me a very, very salient thing that needs to be, when we talk about our community, our broad community of education, as opposed to consolidation. And I think Martin's or whoever's worked this in here nicely, but it's about the repurposing of other locations. But more importantly, to the smaller schools or smaller communities, they don't have anywhere near the same equitable opportunities that we have here, but yet require a high dollar amount of the draw from the ed fund. And so they're kind of in a double negative, and that affects us on one side, because we're not going to be able to continue to do the good things that you saw like this if that doesn't change. So it's really a double loss for them. A lot of money, small class, and they're not getting anywhere near the opportunities that we know that are essential for, as you said nicely, the community of learners, So I like what you've put on really page 4 and 5 around those opportunities. And I think that's a really, really important point that I'd like to see more folks talk about.
So for purpose of this, why don't I propose that Martin and I kind of take another opportunity to redraft. We put it on our December 1st agenda, look to take action on the 3rd, but as was suggested, we get a follow-on meeting set up with our legislators and invite the city to that as well. Any other comments or questions? All right, we'll move on to the agenda for the December 3rd meeting.
I think we're going to need
to do something better to manage the agenda, because there's a bunch of stuff from tonight that has to go on this agenda, and this agenda already goes till 5 minutes of 11.
Well, let's take our December 1st agenda too.
can work on that one,
And we can maybe shift
Okay.
some things to there. But let's look at the third agenda first. I have to find it.
So 2.2 is on there already. 2.5 is on there already.
The resolutions are not on there.
The resolution, I think maybe you could do on the first.
The landfill thing is not on there.
I think the landfill should be on there. It's the right place.
Which of the policy monitoring can we shift to the December 1st meeting? Because I did have 2.2 on that.
2.2 could go. It's in your packet and ready. So 2.2 could go on to December 1st.
I'd suggest moving that integrated data if you're looking to take something off.
Yep,
It's
we've
not
talked about
pressing,
that, that's
we're
fine.
working on that.
What about 2.5? I assume we're going to be talking about
Budget.
a lot at the
You wanna-
first.
You want to do first? Put it on the,
Does that make sense? And that's actually the first time we'll see it, because we didn't do it.
I wondered, for the retreat on the 1st, is the district conference room available?
yeah, that's where we're hoping to do it, I
Because
think.
it says the library, in past, we've done work sessions in the district conference room, and it's
Yeah, well,
comfortable.
it's here. I don't know that the library was available. We want to tape it too. I think we're going to see if our ATN still can do them. I don't know. I can check with Delina. Seems so for our Monday when we tried to do you know, Meg, if the conference room was available? Probably wasn't, huh?
I don't know, but I can check.
So we'll check. I had asked her to see if we could get in there. I don't think, obviously, if it's not on here.
Do we have a timeline for the meeting, like 6 to 8, 6 to 9?
Your
6 to
call.
10?
Just kind of drafted up a list here.
So I know one of our goals for the first was to cover some of the future agenda items.
The back side of your.
But now we're moving actual agenda items that are important.
Well, I think
and
you had
time
graduation requirements, you have personal learning plans, you have flexible pathways. I think, you've gotten a lot of EQS, so tonight, although, was a little, your time scheduling was off, but you've knocked that one out, I think. You're gonna keep hearing about it, but I think it's on there. You have board work sessions, so that one's gonna come off. So you've narrowed that a little bit.
Okay, and actually, do we want to take off graduation requirements, actually, the education quality standards?
From,
Future agenda?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Or we can maybe put it on again for the first time and take off all the,
Take off all the check marks
Yeah.
and reset it.
so let's reset. We'll reset the education quality standards.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want to lose it.
No, it's not gonna go away, I mean,
Right.
it's, okay.
Yeah, I think, so, any other comments on the December 3rd? I think we've taken off integrated data system, added the net metering. Will we have a city-school collaboration on that one?
See how successful I am. Master planning and visioning really still needs to be,
Yeah.
I'm hoping action.
So that may come off, depending on.
Yeah.
So what's under policy monitoring will be 2.8 and 2.0. So we've narrowed that agenda quite a bit on the 3rd. So if we go to the first, what I've got is 2.2 and 2.5, and then the resolution. Oh, and actually the resolution action goes on the 3rd.
So is our meeting on December 3rd and 8th, even though it's a work session?
Yeah. If we can. I don't know that they'll have availability, but it was a goal of the board is to have
all of the meetings.
So right now, we have 2 monitoring reports and a more detailed discussion of the resolution, which I think will be worthy of quite a bit of time.
Yeah, so 2225 and the resolution, right?
And what about just overall budget direction?
No, that's good.
Well, aren't we gonna discuss that in 12-3? Or
Yeah, it's on there. I don't know if it's on
it's
there.
on our schedule for tonight, I mean.
Budget, it should be on the 3rd, too.
It's not on the 3rd.
Well, because we had it on our schedule.
On the super's report.
Yeah, under the super's report.
We had the budget timeline
Right.
tonight. I don't have anything on the 3rd.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll add a budget discussion,
so
but
board-
I think the purpose of the first was largely to set up budget guidance.
Talk about
So
it.
maybe the 3rd will be a little bit briefer
So, yeah, the
conversation.
3rd on the timeline was, that we put on the timeline under the superintendent's report, so we'll make sure that it's on the 3rd.
So is the board satisfied on the 3rd? We've got 2 monitoring reports, 2.2, 2.5. We'll have budget guidance discussions, and we'll have the resolution.
That's on the first, you mean?
On the 1st, yes. Okay.
Okay.
All right, any other questions, comments? We've got those 2 agendas set up. All right, we'll move to, any other comments on future agenda items? Okay, consider the minutes of the meeting of November 5th. Any comments or changes?
Just one change on page 3. At the very bottom, consider the minutes of the meeting. It said that I announced the general consensus. Actually, it was you, Ms. Fitzgerald.
Okay.
Do you see that, Meg?
All right, so with that change, take a motion to accept the, or actually by consensus, we'll accept the minutes of November 5th. And we'll move to the consent agenda. Do you want to briefly?
Sure. So there's some added ELL time of .2 for a high school staff member, currently already there. And then the other one, which is, sad for us, happy for her, Jill Wilkins has announced her retirement. She's a full-time math teacher. She's also our curriculum area supervisor for mathematics, and she's announced her retirement early and hopes that, we'll begin to work on finding a replacement for her as time goes on. So it's with happiness and regret. She's been a great member of our staff and has done great things for us. So as always, we send off an information or a card on the board's behalf. I'll do that.
Please do that, and thank her for her service.
And
do we need to take action on the consent agenda?
Mm-hmm.
So I'll take a motion to accept the consent agenda as recommended by administration.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, and please pass on our thanks and appreciation
Will do.
to Jill. Any questions on AP orders 18, 19, or 20? Okay, and we have an AP order check to Teamcraft Roofing to discuss.
Yeah, this is, again, it's in front of you because it's over the 50.
Mhm.
And the Teamcraft roof is, this is what installment, John, on the roofing?
Yeah, Chamberlain's roof, yeah.
Roof, yeah.
I move to approve the accounts payable
Second.
order. Check to Teamcraft Roofing.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Motion passes. We have a quick board self-evaluation.
Great. I don't know why you're doing that. If somebody wants to start, if you'd like to look at the real-world design students' work and give some feedback, they have made copies here, so anybody have an interest to have the book? Hearing none.
We'll look at it. I'd also like to ask David, I did bring some handouts from the Green Mountain Imperative Summit, so if I could give those to you,
Be
and maybe
great.
we could have
Send 'em
copies
out.
for the board next time.
I got some, I've heard from some of my colleagues that have sent me some too, so.
Okay.
But I'd be happy to do that.
I think, all right, we have all agreed for the board meeting evaluation. With respect to the superintendent feedback from meeting, we have unanimity that we disagree that the agenda was followed and adequate time was allowed for board discussion with respect to the publishing schedule to the public. So there's rare unanimity for a disagree. We also had 3 disagrees with respect to data reports were provided to the board in advance of the meeting in support of its deliberations and required action. But we also have some comments that the
Real world.
Thank you. The real world presentation was awesome. I think that we all like that. Lots of great information, stimulating discussion. However, the agenda was a little ambitious. Good feedback from Susie Merrick as well, and Pat Burke. So what we did here was long but good. Summarizes it.
All right. Unless there's any other comments, I will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
And we adjourn. Thank you all.
Have a good night,
Do we have to
folks.
sign?